IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is Tuesday, January 6th. That's my guy, Trevor Trowbridge. I'm Brian Driscoll, and we are here to talk Notre Dame football. Got a jam-packed show for you guys today. Got a lot going on. We're going to kind of kick off today our Replace and Reload series, Trev. Well, we're going to look at positions where Notre Dame lost starters, impact players, and even some positions where they lost multiple guys. And how are they going to replace that? Some positions we're going to kind of wait till after the portal to talk about because the portal is going to have to address those positions. But there's other positions that we're going to kind of look at and say, hey, listen, this is where they are. These are the questions. It's not so much a spring preview. We won't talk about position battles and stuff like that. It's more of an overall view of the position. Who are the contenders that go into the offseason in position to say, hey, I'm the guy at this position? And so we're going to have that conversation, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to then preview the college football playoffs. The semifinal games are today. We'll preview those. And then we're going to do a mailbag at the end of the day. And the reason that we're going to do a mailbag, Trev, is because we're not going to talk about the portal right now as a featured segment. And listen, I could easily take the anger and frustration that's out there about the portal. Some of it justified, some of it a incredible overreaction based on some faulty reporting or some faulty logic. Part of it's Notre Dame's fault, the fact that they're just terrible at PR and unwilling to kind of, be more open about what's going on like other teams are. Part of it's just people are looking for something to talk about in the offseason. And again, some of it's justified, but the reality is we're on day 4 of the portal, and it's a 2-week process. And look, we could come here today and feed off that frustration and anger. And I promise you, if I said, hey, we're talking portal today in the show, we'd have 5-6 times more people in the show today than we're going to have talking about tight ends. And I can make good money. But I'm not really into the rage bait thing. You guys know that. What I'm going to say is I put some thoughts up on the message board last night, and I will have some thoughts about what's going on in the mailbag, but I'm more going to let you guys ask those questions, and then I'll try to answer them, honestly and truthfully and give as much detail as I'm able to give. But the reality is, Trevor, this is a 2-week process, and there are guys in the portal right now that Notre Dame is after. There are guys on campus yesterday. There's guys on campus today that if they get are going to make everybody happy. There are some things that Notre Dame has done so far that make me scratch my head and say, boy, I hope this works out in the end. The reality is we still have another 10 days of this. There are also some guys that aren't in the portal yet that will jump in the portal that Notre Dame will likely be in on. So my whole thing is I'm not saying people are wrong to be concerned about how things are going. I think some of this is an overreaction. I think there has been a perception about Notre Dame was in on guys that they weren't really maybe as in on or as pushing for as maybe some people thought. And so I just want people to take a deep breath and know that, hey, listen, we're going to talk about this. We'll answer your questions about it in the mailbag. But when this process is over, then we will sit down and evaluate the process. It's no different than people in a game chat that are losing their minds because Notre Dame's down 7-3 in the end of the first quarter. You remember the chat last year against Stanford when Notre Dame was down 7-0 in Stanford and people are losing their minds. Oh, this team sucks. These coaches suck. Final score of the game was 49-7 Notre Dame, right? Like this, just let it play out. Now, it could be a situation where we were losing our minds at the end of the first quarter against Northern Illinois and had good reason to be losing our minds at the end of the game, right? We don't know the answer to that. So we will talk about it, right? We will talk about it. It's just we're not going to react to the roller coaster. We're going to let it all play out, then evaluate the process, the good things we saw, the not so good things we saw, and then look at the roster and look at, kind of how this team is prepared. And I just want to remind people that almost everyone in this chat and on X ended the season saying Notre Dame's going to be loaded next year. And there's only been 2 guys that have jumped in the portal that we didn't expect to jump in the portal that were going to help the team next season. 2. This is still a very talented team. Does that excuse a bad portal season? No, it doesn't. But we don't know that they're going to have a bad portal season. That's all I'm saying. And if they do, we will hammer the people responsible for that. I'm just saying, let's let it play out. We're not going to get into the rage bait. There's enough of that going around. We're going to talk football. And if you guys have questions, we'll answer those questions at the end of the show in a mailbag. So we will have a few more mailbags during the portal period, just so that we can make sure that we're not avoiding the topic, because it is something that you guys want to talk about. And so we will talk about it. And that's why we're going to have the mailbags every day. So if you're looking for mailbag commentary, portal commentary, most of that's going to be for the message board. And I shared some thoughts, some things I like, some guys that are visiting, things like that. Last night, well, I guess it was kind of this morning, I couldn't sleep. It was like 3 a.m. I think I ended up posting that, finishing up, Trev, that post that I put up. And, there's some very good D linemen that were on campus yesterday. There's a very talented defensive lineman that's on campus today. There's some more guys that are going to come in. So, that's kind of where I'm looking at, Trev. So we will talk about it, and we will answer those questions. And of course, if they land guys in the portal, we'll talk about those in the very next show. We'll break those things down. I'm also doing a portal target breakdown every day on the message board, where I'm just taking different guys that are targets for Notre Dame to varying degrees and breaking them down. I did Reed Harris 2 days ago, the receiver from BC. It's a film breakdown. It's also a write-up of their game. I broke down, I think, 7 games each for him and Isaiah Canyon. And then I did Isaiah Canyon yesterday. I'm not sure who I'm going to do today, because some of the guys that I had on my list are no longer on the board for Notre Dame, but I'll definitely get to some guys. But, that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, Trev. So I felt it was important to address that after the long weekend, to let people know, like, no, we're not going to really spend a lot of time on this, because it's an incomplete. It's like, imagine if we went, okay, we're going live after the first quarter of the game, and we're going to talk about this, and Notre Dame sucks. They're only up 10-7 on Boise State at halftime or whatever. And then they end up going on to win, or 10-7 on NC State. They suck. They're terrible. Fire everyone. And then they win 36-7. We're going to let it play out. And you guys know me well enough to know that if it doesn't go well, then we're going to have some things to say about it.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like flipping out and losing my mind and playing into the rage bait when we're 4 days into a 14-day process of just guys entering the portal. These 14 days is not everyone has to be signed. A guy could jump on the portal in the last day, and he can take as much time as he wants to take to go in. The windows are about when you can enter the portal. And it's going to be a little bit more chaotic because there's no spring portal, which I'm happy about. So wanted to get that out of the way, Trevor, before we dive into the actual topic today, which is talking about tight ends. And I did this as a little bit of a shout out to Trevor. And I also want to say goodbye to one of our longtime members, Irish English, who said hot take, tight end is the least important position in the group of football. Yeah, I said it, Trevor. So I'm going to have to ban him because I don't want Trevor to go after him. I'm totally kidding, Irish English. He went on to say that he's just kidding later in the thing. But we're going to talk about tight ends today, Trev, and it kicks off our replace and reload series, where we look at who's gone, is Notre Dame, who are they going to replace, and are they reloading or are they rebuilding? And we're going to have some fun with that today. And, of course, we kick it off with the tight end group.
I'd be lying if I said I was more excited when you texted me that we were talking about tight ends today than I was on Christmas morning. That would be a lie. But, look, man, you guys know how much I love tight ends. And I am very happy that we're kicking off the Replace and Reload series with the tight end position group. But in all seriousness, this is a very important position within Notre Dame's offense. Has been for the last decade. And they're entering a season that's a little bit different than what it was last year. What do I mean by that? Last year, they had to replace Mitch Evans, but there was a clear-cut, all right, it's Eli Raridon's time. The biggest question with him is, can he stay healthy for a 12 to 15 to 16 game season? We didn't know the answers to that as the number one guy, and I think we got that question answered in 2025. This year, it's a little bit different. There isn't that Eli Raridon type of just next guy in type of guy in the room. I would argue that there's several. And that's what makes this conversation so interesting, because it's where is that going to be? We're going to break down all of the different types of players. But, Brian, where we have to start with this conversation is the fact that they do have to replace Eli Raridon. That's the top of the priority list, obviously.
Yeah, there's two ways to look at that, Trev. One is there's a lot of talented guys ready to take control, and that's one way to look at it. The other one is nobody has emerged as the next guy. I mean, so we can kind of look at this in a lot of different ways. And the reality is both things are true. Both things are absolutely true when it comes to the tight end. it is a talented room. There's no question about it. Cooper Flanagan was a 4-star recruit. And I'm not talking about national, my board. 4-star top 250 guy, I believe. James Flanagan was a 4-star top 100 guy for me. Jack Larson was a 4-star top 250 guy for me. And then you've got the incoming freshman class where I believe I had Preston Frizzell in the top 150, I think. And then, of course, I had Ian Premer as a 5-star guy. And then, of course, we saw what, with Ty Washington. So there's a lot of things to look at and say, well, like this is good, but there's a reason that we don't know who the next guy is going to be. At the veteran level, you've got some guys that have solid talent, but maybe they don't have difference maker talent. There's one veteran that we think maybe has some big time talent, but he was injured all of last year, played one whole game, came back from an injury, played one game, had a setback, and missed the rest of the year. So there's a lot of question marks. And so I don't think it's as easy to just say, oh, it's Notre Dame, it's tight ends, it's plug and play. Maybe that's the case. And I think Eli Raridan is going to continue Notre Dame's now 20-plus year stretch of years where the starting tight end, once his eligibility was out, was drafted. I fully expect Eli Raridan to continue that, that run. Will that continue after this? I don't know the answer to that question. But what I'll say is there's plenty of NFL potential in the room. I would just argue the concern is the most high-level NFL talent is freshmen and sophomores. And I think that's where some of the, so when you look at this position, Trevor, there's a lot of potential at this position, but there's also a lot of question marks at this position. And how those question marks get answered is really going to go a long way on how good the room is. Because the note that I have in here is like part of the intro section is long on talent, short on experience. Which one carries the day in 2026? We don't know the answer to that. We can say all we want. Oh, it's Notre Dame. It'll be the talent. But that hasn't happened every year. It hasn't happened every year. And we need to find out if they're going to be able to get that going. And Notre Dame decided not to go to the portal for a tight end, which honestly, Trevor, I liked Brody Foley. He's a nice player. Did not want them to go get him out of the portal. I've said this. I do not want a tight end in the portal unless you have legitimate concerns about the injuries to certain guys on the roster. It's got to be more than one. And they decided to not go. I don't like the way that it was done, at least from the outside. I don't know exactly what was Notre Dame's thinking because they don't talk about it. But what I can tell you is, even though I don't think the process was clunky and it's just another PR hit, I'm happy they made the decision they made as long as there's not some other tight end that they're now going to focus on. I like the talent in the room, and as you know, I don't want Notre Dame to become that lazy coaching staff that says we're just going to keep reloading in the portal and not develop our players. It's the same thing I'll say when we do the receiver show. If you can't develop a productive and effective and efficient level of play from the tight end room when you've got Cooper Flanagan, Ty Washington, Jack Larson, James Flanagan, Ian Premer, and Preston Frizzell, if you can't get that group of 6 guys ready to go play at a high level, then you're not a very good football coach. And I think Notre Dame does have a very good football coach there, and Mike Denbrock. And I also think the guy that he has working with him, Harris Biven, proved to me last year that he can be involved in that room and get those guys ready to go play as well when we saw the growth from Eli Raridan, when we saw the improvements from Ty Washington coming over from Arkansas. So I think that the coaching is there. Let him work. Let him cook with the guys that you recruited out of high school. And obviously, and I include Ty Washington in that regard, because the only reason Ty Washington is at Notre Dame is because of the relationship Mike Denbrock developed him at Cincinnati when he was coming out of high school. And that's what I want to see at this position. That's not true at every position. At some positions, you need portal guys. At this one, coach up the kids you have because you've got talent there.
Yeah, I mean, the situation that they're walking into 2026 with is as good as it can be. What I mean is, look, talent is not a question mark. Size is also not a question mark. That's another popular thing that I've seen about just other positions. People get very, I guess you could say, locked in on what the size of a player is, especially in the trenches. To a degree, I understand. But you have the size, you have the length, you have all of the athletic ability in the world at tight end. The one thing that you're missing is a key contributor, somebody with a lot of different experience, or just really a lot of experience. Right now, most veteran tight end coming back is probably I'd argue a tie between Ty Washington and Cooper Flanagan. From a snaps perspective, it's probably Ty Washington, but the role that Cooper Flanagan played in the offense early on in his career, I would argue was bigger than what Ty Washington did last year, depending on the game. So you have the talent, and that's a really good spot to be in. It's not a situation where, I mean, I guess I'll use defensive tackle at a spot. You referenced other positions in the portals. Like, that is a position where, in my eyes, you have to go and get somebody in the transfer portal.
At least one.
At least a guy.
Like, at least one. You have to.
At least a guy. Tight end, you're not in that spot, but then it does kind of beg the question of, okay, who gets what role then? You have you just look at the room, big picture in a vacuum, and say, okay, we have a long list of talented guys. You have 6'4", 248-pound Ty Washington, 6'6" Cooper Flanagan, 6'3" Jack Larson, 6'6" James Flanagan, 6'6" Ian Premer, then obviously 6'4" Preston Frizzell. Who does what, though? Because in previous years on Notre Dame teams, the tight ends had very carved out roles in what they were doing. I think back to 2020. Michael Mayer was your pass catcher at tight end. Tommy Tremble was your lead blocker in many different scenarios. You know, I even think back to this past season. Eli Raridon, obviously your pass catcher, needed to do yeoman's work as a run blocker. But Ty Washington came in and was virtually not a pass catching threat. What roles does everybody get carved out? That's a question that I'm really interested to watch unfold as the offseason progresses. It's one of the biggest reasons why I'm excited for spring. Who lines up where? Who even begins taking the first team reps? Odds are, if Cooper Flanagan's healthy, it's probably Ty Washington and Cooper Flanagan. But what contributions do you start getting from some of the young guns? I think that's also interesting. So this is a room that's loaded with questions, but given kind of the state of Notre Dame football right now and how some fans are starting to perceive it, there's questions, but they're not all bad. Now, it's a two-sided conversation, but they're not all bad.
They're unknowns. They're not concerns. Like, there's two types of questions that you can have when looking at a football team, Trevor. That's a great point you just made. You got your one for the day. That's the goal. One great point every day. I'm just joking. The first type of question is, hey, look, it's an unknown. Like, listen, we were all excited about the potential that CJ Carr could bring to the offense last year, but it was ultimately an unknown until we came into the season. We really didn't know what he was going to be, even though there was talent there, there was potential. But as you know, we hate using the word potential. Now it's about, I want it to be about production. The second type of question is, I don't feel good about this. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not sure, you know, that this is going to be good. It's like, Trev, you and I we love doing cooking references, right? To make analogies. You ever watch the show Chopped? Like, I used to love that show. And there's sometimes you're like, I don't know what they're going to make with this, man, but I'm excited to see it because I love all those ingredients. And then there's other times I have no idea what we're going to make with this, but it really doesn't matter because I wouldn't eat it anyway based on the crap that's in that box. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of how it looks, right? It's you know, over here it's, look, yeah, there's talent, but there's a lot of guys that have to prove themselves. Everybody in the room has to prove themselves. I think the only guy that you could say is comfortable just being the same guy he was in 2025 is Ty Washington. Now, I hope he doesn't just stay that guy, and we'll talk about him specifically. But if he just maintains the role he has, then that's fine. But Cooper Flanagan can't also be that same guy that he was in the past. Jack Larson can't. You know, James Flanagan can't. Somebody has to step up and say, hey, I'm now the guy. Hopefully. Is there a world, however, where no one emerges and it's sort of a 3 to 4 man rotation that does different things? Can that happen? Yeah, that could happen. Does that debilitate the offense? Not necessarily, if they identify those roles and use those guys effectively in those roles, because of the fact that I do think this is going to be a much more receiver-driven offense in 2026 than it was in 2025, because of the makeup of the entire roster. You know, I think you're going to have running backs that can still catch the ball like last year, but I think it's going to be I think that's more of what it's going to look like. And so that's kind of where I'm at, Trev, I look at it and say the questions are there, but they're not necessarily the bad kind of questions. It could end up being a bad result if guys don't work hard, step up, if there's injuries, things like that. But the questions that exist at tight end to me are more of the unknown type of questions, more so than the Like D tackle. Like, dude, if they don't add somebody, I not only have questions about who's going to step up, I have questions about, do you have enough talent there to have an elite defensive line?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's definitely the question of one side of the coin, you have how good can they be? And then the other side of the coin is, will they be good? I don't think that we have to question, will Notre Dame's tight ends be good? It's just to what degree, how good can they get to? Another facet, I agree with you. I think Notre Dame's offense is going to be a lot more receiver heavy this season. But we also put a lot of emphasis on the offensive line will have to step up their game as run blockers because you don't have 4 and 24 in the backfield. You have very good running backs coming back in 2026. You don't have a wide receiver that can get tackled by 3 guys in the backfield against Navy, roll off of the chest of a defender, stay on his feet, and run the ball for a 48-yard touchdown. That's just not in the room. Good thing is the other 135 FBS teams also don't have that coming back in their running back room. But you guys know me. I'm a huge proponent of tight end blocking. That's also going to have to become a more continuous part or a consistent part of this offense, especially with more emphasis being put on the run game design, execution of blocking in the run game. The tight ends are going to play a huge part in that. The emergence of 2 or 3 more even tight ends in this offense, will that give Mike Denbrock more confidence in short down and distance situations to not put Jordan Faison and a Will Pauling type of receiver on the edge to seal the edge in blocking? Will the emergence of Jack Larson, the continued progression of a James Flanagan, an Ian Premer, a healthy Cooper Flanagan, will that even do something like change the personnel groupings on 3rd and short, 4th and short, or down on the goal line? So this has a trickle-down effect, not just, okay, are they going to have another tight end like Eli Raridan that starts the season off as their leading receiver from a yardage standpoint through the first 2 games by a wide margin? I don't know the answer to that question. I'm with you. I think it'll be more receiver heavy, but with that being said, we've also been big proponents that if CJ Carr has a season that we think that he's going to have, he's probably going to be a Heisman favorite at the start of the season. I'm waiting for FanDuel to put out those odds to see where he falls in that conversation. And having a good tight end is going to play a factor in that conversation. So all going to be very interesting pieces. Who's going to be the number 1? What will all of that look like?
Yeah, because the tight end doesn't have to necessarily be an elite difference. It doesn't have to be Michael Mayer. It doesn't even have to be Eli Raridan, but it also can't be non-existent. It also can't be, 15 catches at the end of the season. You have to provide some sort of threat so that teams have to prepare for it. And the more of a threat you provide, the more impactful that position can be. Because, let's say Jaden Greathouse comes back and he's everything that we thought he was going to be this year. Difference maker, dude, elite guy. If you have a tight end that's not really a threat, they're just going to start focusing their safeties on high-lowing and bracketing Jaden Greathouse. Be real aggressive with him at the line of scrimmage, and then have a safety over top to take away corners, slot fades, things like that. That's what you're going to do. But if you have a tight end that's like, okay, you can do that, but then, Cooper Flanagan or James Flanagan or whoever else, or maybe it's a combination of the 3 of them, are going to go for 8 catches and 112 yards and a touchdown. Cool. You need to have that. And so when I look at this position and you talk about, the competition, it could be roles. It could be guys stepping into roles. Maybe Jack Larson develops into a really good number 3 tight end that is used in certain situations. I think of Jack Larson, I'm thinking that guy could be a great red zone weapon because he might have the best hands on the team. I mean, he really might. He's got great hands, and we know him and CJ are tight. So, that's the thing, Trev, is the coaches need to go into this offseason with a different frame of mind and allow the room to tell you how to use it, as opposed to determining, here's how we want to use it. Now let's try to fit people into how we want them to use them. Let the room tell you how to use it. If one guy emerges as the guy, then play him as a number 1. But if that doesn't happen, don't force the issue. If Jack Larson is really overall your number 3 tight end, but he does one thing really well, use him in that one thing. If you identify, look, Ty Washington is just not great at this, but he's really good at this, then use him in that thing. Cooper Flanagan's not really a movement piece. He's not really a guy that we're going to line up in the slot and run a bunch of slot fades to like we might have done with Eli Raridan. He's a different kind of player. He's not as fast as Eli was. We're not going to run him on as many vertical routes, but he does these things very well. Then use him that way. Same thing with James Flanagan. Same thing with Ian Premer. don't be afraid to play 4 different guys, depending on what you're trying to do in certain situations. And in some weeks, that might mean Jack Larson plays a lot more. Some weeks, it means he doesn't play hardly at all, or, whoever we're talking about in this situation. But allow the room to tell you who's going to play, as opposed to saying, this is what we're going to do. We're 11 personnel. We need this guy to do this, and this is what we're going to do. And that's what I'm hoping from a coaching staff standpoint we get. Let's talk players a little bit here, Trev. Unless you have more you want to add, we're going to kind of dive through this group a little bit. And we're just going to go oldest to youngest is how we're going to do this. And we're going to start with Cooper Flanagan. Cooper Flanagan obviously going into his in oldest. I'm kind of also changing the rules a little bit because technically Ty Washington is the oldest, but I'm going guys that have been at Notre Dame the longest. So we're going to start with Cooper Flanagan. And I think the biggest question about this is his health. Because I'll say this, Trevor, if Cooper Flanagan does not get hurt against Indiana in the playoffs in 2024, the end of the 2024 season, what's in 2024? We're having a very different conversation today about the tight end position going into 2026. Because one of two things is going to be true. Either A, we know what Cooper's going to do, or B, we're saying we don't have Cooper Flanagan because he's off to the NFL as well. Because they were a really potent 1-2 punch, and he's like, yeah, I'm ready for the NFL. So I think that to me is his injury and only playing one game last season is a big reason why this group is such a question mark. Can he come back healthy? Can he get back to his old form? And what does Cooper Flanagan being the guy look like in this offense?
Agreed. I think the Cooper Flanagan injury put this program in a spot where they had to go out and get Ty Washington. Not good, not bad, just my observation. Ty Washington was a contributor in 2025. But if Cooper would have stayed healthy, I still think he would have been tight end 2, playing second fiddle to Eli Raritan. It would have been used differently. Cooper would have been more of the blocker. He would have probably caught the occasional red zone touchdown. I say that, but Notre Dame starting tight end ended last regular season without a receiving touchdown, which I still to this day think is really, really crazy. But with that being said, I think Cooper probably would have came back this season. There's a chance he would have gone off to the NFL, but I think there was, even if he played this past season,
it's unlikely he's gone to the NFL.
Yeah.
But that's the only other option we would have been looking at.
Sure.
That we would know what he
Absolutely.
is.
There'd be significantly less uncertainty. But that would put this tight end room in a spot where, okay, you have your solidified tight end win in Cooper Flanagan going into 2026. Then you have a host of young guys that can continue to develop and start rotating in behind him. But now we kind of have to treat Cooper Flanagan kind of the same way we have to treat James Flanagan of, okay, what version of them are we going to get in 2026? Different conversations, but big picture, it's kind of the same conversation, which is interesting. But if he can stay healthy, we have, at least with him, a baseline of what he can contribute with in this offense. Bigger sample size than what James Flanagan gave us last year. Not bad. It's just he was a true freshman. He didn't play that much. But if Cooper Flanagan is healthy, I have a baseline of understanding of where he's at. What will his contribution be within the offense? I don't know what that is for James Flanagan, what his baseline is. You could argue just a good run blocker, but he's going to improve significantly from a true freshman season to his true sophomore season, redshirt. Did he redshirt?
Who, James?
Yeah. Did James Flanagan
James Flanagan redshirted. Cooper did not until this year.
Okay, I got you.
So Cooper actually was able to get a redshirt back because he played as a freshman, so he didn't redshirt as a freshman.
Oh, okay. Right
so
on.
He actually gets his redshirt back. So now him and James both have a fifth-year opportunity, obviously a couple years apart.
Gotcha. But point being, there's going to be a vast improvement from James Flanagan from his redshirt, his freshman year to his academic sophomore year, redshirt freshman year athletically. So don't really know what baseline that is. And then it's impossible to tell with Ian Premer and Preston Frizzell because they're probably not even on campus yet or going to be very, very soon. So I like where Cooper's at if he's healthy. I don't know how much of a receiving contribution you're going to get from him. I think he recorded the longest reception of the opening game of 2024. That little corner route that he ran, it was either his or Bo Collins' back shoulder in the Texas A&M game in 2024. So I don't want to make it sound like he's like only a blocker and like just a thin offensive tackle. He has ability in the pass catching game. All I'm saying is we understand his foundation as a blocker and what he can bring.
Yeah, him and Ty Washington are the only two guys on the roster you look and say, I know at least they can do one role because they've done that role already. Like I agree with you completely, Trevor. Like we know the baseline of what Ty Washington and and Cooper Flanagan can do. Like the baseline. Now the question is to your point about Cooper is there something beyond that from Cooper Flanagan? And what does that look like? And honestly, the way that Notre Dame used its tight ends in 2025, in my opinion, out of necessity, I think Cooper Flanagan actually fits that even better than Eli Raridan. Here's what I mean by that. And I'm hoping we don't have to see a repeat of that in 2026. During the season, I was kind of like scratching my head being like, why? Why would Notre Dame do as much 7-man protection and keeping Eli Raridan in as they did last year? It didn't make any sense to me. But as I kind of went through the season and started watching film, I'm like, yeah, now I kind of get it. Two things are true reasons why. Number one, I believe that teams were trying to blitz CJ Moore to get at him. Number two, I don't think they had as much faith in the offensive tackles as some people think that they did. And I think that's part of it as well. And then there was faith that the receivers could go make plays in with less guys out in a route, and that CJ could make the throws. You had a Malachi Fields that you could stretch the field with and just win a backside one-on-one. You had a quarterback that could throw the ball over top of the defense for big plays. And so it made more sense to do that. Cooper Flanagan's great in that role. And then also, still have your opportunities to make plays in the pass game, move the chains on third down, run some of the screen stuff, run your stick routes, run your out cuts, run your dig routes, things like that they used Eli Raridan for. The only thing we'll see less of is, they would run Eli on some slot fades. They would run Eli on some vertical wheel routes. If you think about it, he had a big wheel route for getting inside. I mean, he never scored, but he got inside the 5 a bunch. The A&M wheel route. He had the great post-snap switch rail route against Arkansas where CJ just put it perfectly. I don't know how much of that you're going to be doing with Cooper Flanagan, but we've seen him catch the ball down the field. I mean, he had a great touchdown catch against Pitt. He had a great, a really nice, crucial catch on a corner route against Texas A&M in 2024 from Riley Leonard. So I think Cooper's style fits how Notre Dame used the tight end this year. He's also a big-bodied kid with pretty good hands. We haven't seen him have to use his hands a whole lot just because he hasn't been targeted a ton. But when he has, he's been good. He's been good catching the football. So, Trev, I think in that regard, if Cooper's healthy, I think the transition back to being an effective player is there. And in some ways, I kind of feel like, although it may have hurt them in 2025 that he only played one game, I honestly think this might be a blessing in disguise for the 26 team. 25 teams better if Cooper Flanagan's healthy. Right? And comes back and plays, even if it's at 85%. But the fact that he practiced and stuff, but the fact that he was able to he was forced to let's pull back a little bit because maybe rushed him a little bit too much is a reason why I look and say that gives him that extra year of getting back healthy. He's now 2 years removed or 2 seasons removed from the Achilles injury. He's now over a full year removed from the injury and the surgery. And by the time we get to the fall, he'll be even closer to that 2 years removed, which means we're going to get a more healthy, more athletic version of Cooper Flanagan than what we would have seen in 2025. And so I think if he's healthy, that's an important role because I think he fits that offense very well. And he can still be a Troy Nicholas type of guy. I don't think Cooper's a guy that can only catch balls 7-8 yards down the field. What I mean is, you're not going to run him on a bunch of slot fades where you're looking for a speed type of slot fade. I wouldn't mind running him on slot fades from the 9 or the 10 where it's you're less likely to get any safety help.
Yeah,
he's got that big long catch radius. He's 6'6", he's got long arms, and he can make those kind of plays. I'm just not going to have him run a slot fade from the 40 where I need him to get over top of the defense. It's just different. But I think Cooper Flanagan's a kid that has a chance to be a good football player at Notre Dame. The only reason he's a question mark is because of the health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agree completely with the different types of route concepts as well. Similar to you remember the slot fade that Mitchell Evans ran in 24 against Florida State? They were on the 11, something like that.
And Eli had one of those against USC in 2024 as well. Yeah.
He did. Definitely something like that. But you brought up an interesting point about Cooper about can we see another level from him? Is there another level from Cooper? And I think that we can have that same conversation about Ty Washington. Again, those are the go ahead.
Let me just say one thing. Cooper Flangan only has 5 career catches. That's it. 3 of them are for touchdown.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I think that might change a little bit. But the point is, he clearly was used as a red zone weapon at times.
Yeah.
I mean, he caught a touchdown pass against Indiana. Or no, it wasn't Indiana. Was it Indiana? Who did Cooper catch a touchdown pass against in 2024? Give me a second. It was Virginia. I knew it was at home. He caught the little pop pass against Virginia when the game was in doubt. And, of course, we remember the little play action fake he had for a touchdown against Purdue's backups. Well, actually, it was against their first team. So, but the point being, Trev, is that we've seen him make plays. I mean, the ball that Steve Angeli threw to him in 2023 against Pittsburgh was a heck of a ball, but it was out in front of him a little bit, and he had to kind of extend to go make that play. So we've seen Cooper be a weapon in the red zone, and I think in some ways he's an even better red zone weapon than Eli because he is a bigger-bodied kid. Eli's still kind of thin. He's 250, but he's still kind of thin. Cooper's a much fuller frame, a little broader shoulders, a little thicker hips, to where I think that, and he's not as explosive as Eli. I think he's maybe a little bit more fluid than Eli.
Yeah.
A little bit more smooth than Eli, which could give him some opportunities in the red zone, and then also on some of those read zone pulls that they like to do.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. His frame is closer to Cole Kmet's than it is Eli.
Yeah, he's 6'6", 255 is I think what he was listed at last year.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely correct. And more broad shouldered and a little thicker hips and things like that. Yes, I think that's a great example. Great example.
Ty Washington is the other player, Brian, that again we talked about. We understand what baseline he brings to the offense, but in a similar conversation, is there a next level that he can reach? And one of those questions we just didn't get him. We didn't see him used in the passing offense that much. It wasn't until Syracuse where CJ, the starting quarterback at Notre Dame, completed a pass to Ty Washington. Kenny Minchie targeted him a couple times. It wasn't until the very end of the season that we saw CJ do it. Does he become that tight end one? Yeah, that we talked about. Who knows? That's a major question with him.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Ty Washington, and there's some things to look at and say, he did some good things last year. I think if we could get like the Arkansas version of Ty more often, meaning the how he looked playing against Arkansas, where he was a little extra motivated, I think the big thing for Ty is a lack of consistency. And there's some games where Ty looks like, okay, now that's a heck of a portal pickup. And then other games you're like, dude, he's blocking no one. I think that lack of consistency. So when I look at Ty Washington, I ask myself, is there another level for him? Just on consistency alone, there's another level for him. He's going to be in the system now for 2 years. He's going to get more consistent coaching. He's hopefully understands now that he's with coaches that believe in him and will push him and encourage him and say, okay, I can become a more consistent player, even if his role doesn't change at all. It's still an important role, and it's still a role where you look at and say, dude, you've got you've got a chance to really help this football team, whether it's, playing as a mostly a blocker, whether it's as a red zone weapon, like whatever the case may be, you've got an opportunity to help this football team. I mean, he played 244 snaps last season, and only one of them came against Miami. I mean, he was a factor. After that, he was on the field at least 13 plays for every game that they played this season. And so there's opportunities for him to at least solidify the role he had last year, where Cooper Flanagan slides into that number one role. Ty stays where he is as number two. But if he's going to do that, he's got to be a better version of what he was last year. And what does that mean? A more consistent version. Execute your assignments at a higher level. Play with the aggressiveness we saw from you against Arkansas. Play with the aggressiveness we saw from you, against Navy, and bring that on a consistent basis. That's what I want to see from Ty Washington. I thought he was pretty good against Texas A&M as well as a blocker. And then he'd go out the next week and just was awful against Purdue as a blocker. Like, that's the kind of thing that Ty needs to work out and just become a more consistent player. And if he can become a more consistent player, then he can help this football team. Is that going to mean he catches a lot more passes? I don't know. But it certainly means that you're going to be able to trust him more and be thinking about throwing him more passes. I mean, he caught 6 of the 5 balls that were targeted at him last year, but they went for, I think, 35 yards, 34 yards, something like that. Like, he was targeted 6 times. They caught 5 of them, but they were all short throws. 34 yards, 6.8 yards per reception. His average depth of target last year was 5.8 yards down the field. But that could expand if he's able to be a more consistent player. Last year, he didn't have spring ball. He was around in the spring, but he couldn't practice. He couldn't be with the team. He couldn't work out. He couldn't do those things. Well, now he will. He'll be a year in the system. And hopefully that the result of that is Ty Washington, at the very least, become a more consistent version of the player that was in the role he had this season.
Agreed. I'm big with comparisons, and you're going to have to hang with me through this one, but I could very much see Ty Washington's role this year being what Luke Talich was to the safety room in 2025. Like, that's how I view him. Look, everything about Ty Washington screams tight end 2. And I don't mean that as an insult. He could be a very good and tight end 2 in the Notre Dame offense means a lot more than what some people think that it does just looking at a depth chart.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that safety 3, which was Luke Talich this past season, played a big role on defense, but he wasn't that go-to big playmaking guy like what Tay Johnson was or what Adon Schuler was. I see that role for Ty Washington for the Notre Dame offense this year. I see him being just that. If he can raise his level of consistency and just be that blocker, because from a pass catching standpoint, I know he has good hands. But I don't know what his ability is after the catch. I don't know if he has that Ian Premer, James Flanagan, potentially Cooper Flanagan ability after the catch. I don't know what his contested catch ability is. I would have to assume relatively decent. But it's just we haven't seen him do it a whole lot in games.
Right.
Arguably, we didn't see him do it at all in 2025 for Notre Dame, and a very small sample size of doing it at Arkansas.
And not a lot of those at Arkansas were like contested catch opportunities.
No.
But your offense isn't living and dying by your tight end's ability to win contested catches necessarily. But if you can do it, that makes it even better.
Absolutely, because we saw what Eli Raridan was able to do this season from a contested catch perspective for the offense this year, and he made some big plays. But Ty Washington's personality also screams that. I transcribed a lot of different interviews over this past season, and Ty Washington was one of them. And he's just one of those guys that it's like, hey, coaches asked me to block, I'm going to go block. If they need me to run a route, I'm going to go run a route. If they need me on, kick coverage, I'm going to go be on kick coverage. Like, everything about him screams role player. And that's not a bad thing. I know some people will take that as like, oh, so he's just not good. It's like, no, not at all.
Listen, the number 2 tight end on the 2020 playoff team got drafted in the 3rd round.
Mm-hmm.
He was never Tommy Trumbull was never a number 1 tight end in Notre Dame, except for a few games here and there where either Michael Mayer was injured or in 2019 Cole Kmet was injured.
Mm-hmm.
He was never the number 1 tight end, and he has over 1,000 career yards in the NFL. The number 1 tight end on that team was a 2nd-round draft pick. He has over 700 career receiving yards. And the number 3 tight end on that team, Brock Wright, has been with the Detroit Lions for now 5 seasons, and he has over 600 career yards and 11 career touchdowns. Brock Wright actually is tied with Tommy Trumbull for the most touchdown receptions of that trio. They all have more than Michael Mayer. Now, Mayer's been in the NFL less time, but you get my point. Like, those are all NFL players, and that's where you want to be. You want your number 2 to be a future NFL player. Is Ty Washington a future NFL player? I don't know the answer to that, but it is an important role, is the point Trevor's making, and I completely agree with. It doesn't mean, well, you're number 2, so you're just kind of a guy. Well, it may be just a guy, but you don't want just a guy as your number 2 tight end at Notre Dame. You want him to be a dude. You go back and look at, for much of Brian Kelly's tenure, and especially Lou Holtz's tenure, they'd have their 4th or 5th tight end on the depth chart as a young guy would eventually grow into a 1st-round draft pick. They would have 4 or 5 NFL players on the roster at a time at tight end. And you think of a lot of Brian Kelly's tenure. You've got, 2012, you had Tyler Eifert, Ben Koyak, and Troy Nicholas all on the team together. And then 2013 was Troy Nicholas and Ben Koyak, and then Nicholas becomes a 2nd-round draft pick. And then the year after, it's just Ben Koyak with Durham. Now he's got Durham Smythe with him, and then he goes to become an NFL draft pick. And then Durham Smythe eventually takes over. He becomes an NFL draft pick, and on and on and on and on. And a lot of these guys began their careers the complementary piece. Tyler Eifert began his career as the complimentary piece to Kyle Rudolph, and then Kyle Rudolph got hurt, and Tyler was able to step in and be the guy. So ideally, you want that number 2 guy to be someone who is a legitimate weapon. I just don't, and it's going to require that. We talked all year last year, and I know you get frustrated. Why don't they use number 2 tight end? And my whole point is if you're never going to throw to your number 2 tight end, then I just don't know why you're running as much 12 personnel as you're running. Just occasionally throw them a mix up. At the same time, you're like, but do you really want to take a touch away from, Eli Raridan or Jordan Faison or Malachi Fields or Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price to give it to Ty Washington? He didn't prove himself to be that kind of guy last year. He needs to try to do that, or they need to find a number 2 tight end that can be that. And that's kind of where I see that position group selling, and he's going to be part of that. He either step up and become a more consistent player, or someone's got to push him out of that role. One of those 2 things has got to be true. And then you talk about that. What's the role for Jack Larson this year? Trev, I think that this is a big year, big offseason for Jack Larson. Big offseason. And the thing for Jack is Jack's a good athlete, and Jack has phenomenal hands. I mean, we've seen that. We've seen that at Notre Dame. And if you're not sure of what I'm referring to, I would encourage you to go back and watch the blue gold game this past season, where Jack Larson made a really impressive one-on-one catch over top of, by the way, Adon Schuler. And then he obviously caught 3 passes this year, caught 3 of the 4 targets this year, and when we saw what he could do. But the thing for Jack is Jack has got to get stronger, and he's got to become a better blocker. And I don't need Jack Larson to line up against a 9, attached block a 9 technique and drive him off the ball. But Jack's got to get really good at split flow zone. He's got to get really good at ISO blocks. And what I mean by the ISO blocks, it's sometimes it's just lining up as that duo, and they run that duo load, and they just kind of have that tight end lead him through the way. Or they'll run their counter stuff where he's the puller, and he's got to lead him up through the hole. It's still an ISO block. It's just more off of a counter that as opposed to a downhill duo ISO type of play where you're blocking linebackers and then blocking in space. If Jack Larson wants to get on the field this year and use his pass game skills, then he's got to become a more effective blocker. And that means not getting it after in the weight room. And I'm not saying Jack hasn't done that. I'm just saying this is what's needed. He's going to have to really get after in the weight room and really take a lot of pride in his craft as a blocker this offseason. Because if Jack Larson becomes a quality blocker this offseason, then you almost have to play him. Because he's too good of a pass catcher, potential-wise, not to play. But he's not a good enough pass catcher to put in when you only know they're basically going to throw him the football. Like, he's not that good. You could do that if you had a young Tyler Eifert. Like, look, man, I don't care if they know we're throwing him the ball. You can do that with Ian Premer this year. Oh, Ian Premer's in the game. We're going to throw it to him. So, still can't cover him. Like that's not Jack. So he has to be more of a consistent all-around weapon. And if he can do that, I do think Jack Larson could push his way into the field this year. I like Jack a lot more than some people. He just has to be – you can't be a tight end that's not a really consistently effective blocker. That's going to be the big thing that Jack has to show this year.
The conversation around Jack Larson is very interesting because when I look at this tight end room, he is the one body type that doesn't kind of fall in line with everybody else. I mean, everybody else is 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". I mean, Cooper Flanagan with cleats on and a helmet's probably closer to 6'7" than he is 6'5". Then you have Jack Larson that's 6'3". I think that Notre Dame's boundary receiver last year was taller than their third-string tight end. So that's a very interesting spot with Jack. I agree with you. He needs to be a better run blocker. Could not agree more. Has to get stronger in that field. Where I'll be interested to see is will the coaching staff be willing to not always line him up attached? Because I would argue out of the tight ends that we've talked about so far, and you could even argue in the room, Jack probably has the most ability right now, maybe outside of Preston Frizzell, to play not attached. That's interesting with Jack Larson. So
for the spring?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you put him in a spot where you line him up unattached, but still as a blocker? Do you run 12 personnel and have Ty Washington or Cooper Flanagan attached and you line Jack Larson out on the slot and then you have him block back on an outside zone? I don't know what that looks like for him. So I'm more in the camp of he has to improve as a run blocker, but I would also like to see the coaching staff play to his strengths a little bit, because I don't think, and this is just me, I've never coached tight ends, but I don't know if it's fair to say, okay, Jack, 6'3", 250-pound Jack Larson, go block that DN the same way that I just watched Cooper Flanagan at 6'6", 260 do.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not going to ask him to line up attached to the line of scrimmage and drive block a defensive end. But they don't ask the tight ends to do that all the time. They're doing a lot of movement blocks. They're doing a lot of split flow zone. Split flow zone is basically, it's inside zone, but you bring your back in inside zone, you have to account for the backside edge some way, somehow. Teams do it differently. They line up someone back there and he just has to get inside of them. They will not block that guy, and he's now in run read zone. If he comes down, you pull, get outside. If he stays outside, you give. They will do things where they will read him, and if he comes down, you pull, and now you're running like a little slide play, screen play to the tight end, which Mike Denbrock likes to do. That's actually the play that Cooper Flanagan got hurt on in 2024 the first time, because this Achilles isn't the only injury he's had to deal with. And then they'll have him kind of lead around on duo, and then on counters he's got to wrap around and he's got to block a linebacker. On duo load, he's got to get to the second level and block a linebacker. Those are things that I can ask a 6'3", 250-pound tight end to do. And that's a lot of what Notre Dame does. And if they're in 12 personnel, that's definitely what I'm going to ask him to do, because last year they would use Ty at times as the front side blocker, and then they'd have Eli pulling around. Well, if Cooper Flanagan is your number one, he's the guy you want play side. He's the 6'6", 250-pound guy you want blocking that 9 technique or down blocking on that 7 technique or 5 technique or whatever, if you're going to run some kind of pin and pull. That's not Jack Larson. What Jack is that guy that's the wraparound guy. He's a split flow zone guy. He's the guy that can get outside on a toss crack and lead block. And there's plenty of that in the Notre Dame offense. But to play to your strengths, I need you to be more than a one-trick pony, unless that one strength is elite.
Sure.
And that's what I'm saying is I don't think Jack Larson is a good enough pass catcher for me to say, we're going to put you in there if you're not someone who can be a consistently effective blocker. I didn't say dominant. I said effective. And if he can do that, then, okay, now we can play to his strengths. Well, aren't you going to know you're always throwing the football? No. You only know that if you do that 9 times out of 10. If you're 60-40 pass to run with him in the game, but 40-60 pass to run with Ty Washington in the game, there's a greater chance of running or passing than running. But that doesn't mean you're sitting back dropping 8 because he's in the game, because otherwise you're going to get crushed on the 40% of the time that they're running the football. And that 40 becomes 60 and they're averaging 8 yards a carry. And that's my thing is you can't have a guy in there that's I wouldn't say a liability, but just not good enough for what you need for when you're playing Miami, BYU, and then getting into the postseason and playing the Ohio States, the Oregons, the Texas A&Ms, the I was about to say Alabama's. I meant to say like a team that's actually physical and good. Oregons, teams like Indiana's, right? Like I was breaking down some Indiana film yesterday and offense and defensive line film, and I'm just like, makes me laugh. And you get all these people like, Notre Dame's not big enough on the offensive or defensive line. I'm like, have you watched Indiana? Like, seriously, have you watched them play? They do not exactly have a massive defensive line, but you know what those guys can do? They play hard. They play with great leverage. They're strong. They get after it. They're incredibly well coached. And so size isn't always like the primary driver of this. And that's the thing. And they also don't ask those guys to play like 320-pounders. And that's my thing with Jack Larson is you don't go in there and ask Jack Larson to be Cooper Flanagan. You don't ask him to be Troy Nicholas or 100%. Tommy Tremble as blockers. But he has to at least be good and consistent in that regard. And if he can do that, then I think he could work himself into it. Now, the problem for Jack is behind him in the younger classes is where your greatest raw talent lives. And obviously the first guy we'll talk about is James Flanagan. This isn't a big offseason for James per se, because he's just going to be a redshirt freshman. But his offseason is big for the room. Because I would argue that the growth that James Flanagan shows from now until when they kick off in September, when they head up to Lambeau Field in Wisconsin, right, where he's from, I'll remind people of that. James Flanagan's from Green Bay, right? Dad obviously played in the NFL, played at Notre Dame. He goes back home in September. The growth he shows from now until then, I'm going to say it right now, is ultimately going to determine how good this position group is going to be in 2026. I think James Flanagan making that freshman to sophomore jump is going to determine if this is a solid room or a really good room. Because even if Cooper Flanagan makes that jump as the number one, if James makes the jump to where he's like, okay, I'm the number two, or even pushing you for number one, then all of a sudden you're like, okay, now you got a 6'6", 255-pound guy in Cooper Flanagan. And then you've got James Flanagan, who what was he listed at this year for Notre Dame?
6'6", 241.
And he'll be over 250 by next year. And he's strong. I mean, he is strong. You want to know what kind of potential he has? Go watch the 56-yard touchdown run against Pitt and watch James Flanagan, and you're like, yeah, that guy's legit. And I'll just say this. Notre Dame had to make a very tough decision to not play him more this year. Very tough decision. I can just tell you from what I was told, he made it very difficult for the coaches to make that decision. And the thinking was, we'll still preserve him, but they were gearing him up to be a factor when they got to the playoffs. He was going to play a lot more in the postseason than he did in the regular season. And you kind of saw that, Trev. I mean, you saw that at the end of the year when he was playing. You saw that against Pitt. I mean, we broke it down. I think this was discussed upon further review that Vince and I did, or in the film breakdown that I did of that game. But I said, look, when James Flanagan was on the field, the run game was a lot more effective than it was. I mean, he played 15 snaps against Pitt and 21 snaps against Stanford, and most of that was in the first half. I mean, he was playing for them. That was going to continue in the postseason. And they were going to use him for, like, he was going to play in every game in the postseason.
Oh, yeah.
So now you look at him and say, okay, what kind of – because remember, he wasn't an early enrollee last year. He was a guy that showed up over the summer. This is going to be his first full offseason with Notre Dame. I think the sky is the limit for James Flanagan. Now, he's a bit more of a throwback. He's a lot like Cooper Flanagan. But I think James brings a little bit more of a vertical ability to the pass game, maybe than Cooper does a little bit. But there's a world in which they go 12 personnel, and you've got two tight ends where you're legitimately just like, it's old school 12 personnel, where it's like, we're just going to, the way it used to be back when I was coaching, the Broncos were this way, but when inside zone was really like the thing in football, and you were under center, you'd go split, you'd go balance formation, 2x2, two tight ends, and you're just going to say, where's the tightest technique? We're running at him. And it didn't matter what tight end was where, because you just had two dudes on the edge blocking for you. You're going to have some of that next year, but James showed against Pitt that he can work around and get up to the second level as well. So I'll say this, and Ian Premer will talk about, Preston Frizzell, Cooper Flanagan, Jack Larson, Ty Washington, all those guys. This is the player whose growth is going to determine just the ceiling of this group.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, look, man,
thanks for adding that more in there. First, you're like, couldn't agree. I was like, wow, really? I thought I nailed that one, Trev. I thought I had some good thoughts. You're like, couldn't agree.
Couldn't agree. Roll the credits. Enjoy your guys' Tuesday. No, I agree wholeheartedly, man. James Flanagan is the catalyst for this room. He sets the floor. I could not agree anymore. I had that ready to fire at the hip talking about him, because like we talked about, we have the established foundations of Cooper Flanagan and Ty Washington. Cooper Flanagan to a degree. We don't really know what quality workload looks like for Jack Larson in meaningful minutes in a college football game. And so James Flanagan is one of the higher ceiling guys in the room, in my opinion. Like you said, the bulk of the talent is kind of in that really sophomore to freshman classes. And when we get ready to talk about the freshmen, I'm going to talk about, how I think that what their performance will kind of help dictate what the overall ceiling is going to be for that room. But James Flanagan helps dictate the floor. He was their second highest graded pass blocker against Pitt of the entire offense, according to Pro Football Focus. Now, I always take grades with a grain of salt, but there's a vast difference between what James Flanagan's grade was and what Ty Washington's run blocking grade was, going back to the conversation we had earlier about consistency with him. But Notre Dame's tight end room is in a spot where if you can raise the level of play with Ty Washington's consistency and James Flanagan takes that jump, you have a really, really nice three-headed monster at tight end. And that's before you factor in what Jack Larson might bring to the table, before you factor in what Preston Frizzell and Ian Premer bring to the table. I'm with you wholeheartedly. James Flanagan's the catalyst of the room, and he will help set the floor. He will kind of, not solely, but he will play a major part in dictating what the floor is for that room, and then all the surrounding talent will kind of help dictate what the ceiling is.
Yeah, I think it's big for him. I really think he can be a dude. And that, when I mean dude, I don't mean like he's going to go catch 40, 50 passes next year. I'm talking like he could catch at least 10, average 15 to 17 yards on those catches. Maybe he's more of a red zone chain mover weapon, where he only catches 10 and like 9 of them go for first downs or touchdowns. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that he could help you, but at the very least, he gives you a legit forceful weapon in the run game. If Cooper Flanagan has the offseason we as in fans want to see from him and is what the Notre Dame coaches need from him, and if James Flanagan has the kind of freshman to sophomore jump I think he's capable of, blocking at the tight end position is going to look way different than it did in 2025. And it was solid in 2025 for the most part. There were times it was really good. There's times it was, what was that? But I think overall it was solid, and I think it could be really good next year if those two players develop the way I think that they're capable of, but also the way they need to. And honestly, James Flanagan's the reason I thought it was a mistake to go to the portal for a tight end, because that guy's going to take reps away from all of the guys, and James Flanagan needs all the reps he can get from now until the end of the spring, just like Ian Premer's going to need all the reps he can get when he shows up this summer. You don't want somebody taking those reps away who's a good football player. And Brody Foley was a good football player. I don't know that he was moving the needle. I mean, the guy played at Indiana for 2 years, including under Kurt Cignetti in 2024, and couldn't get on the field. Then goes to Tulsa and has a 30-something catch, 600-yard season. Okay. What does that mean to me? You know what I mean? Like, I'd rather you just do your job and do what you get paid to do and coach up James Flanagan. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm excited about. I'm excited they pass on him. And so just a little portal nugget, I was told that they are the ones that canceled his visit. We can talk about whether they should have set it up in the first place only to cancel it 2 days later. It's a different conversation for a different day, but I'm glad they did, because I told you when I heard he was visiting. I think I told you, maybe Sean. It's like I don't get that one. I don't get that one. He's a nice player, but you've already got guys that could do what I mean, you're telling me Jack Larson couldn't go to Tulsa and catch 30 passes for 500 yards, something like that? Like, you're telling me Ty Washington couldn't do that? Of course he could. So that didn't really do it for me. Not that he's not a good football. He's a good football player. It just doesn't move the needle when you have the talent they have on the roster. Now, if Cooper was gone and he was injured, then I'd say, yeah, you got to go get that guy. You need a veteran guy that at least gives you a baseline. But with, as far as I know, Cooper's coming back. And so I'm like, roll with what you got, because I think this room has got some potential, and James is a big part of that. Let's wrap up with the freshman class, Trev. They got one guy coming in this spring, Preston Frizzell, who needed to come in the spring. I mean, he was a guy that needs to come in and get in the weight room and the nutrition program right now and fill out that frame. And I think there's a lot of room for Preston Frizzell to add weight. The fact that he was also, he spent most of his springs playing baseball. This is a really good baseball player. And when you're playing baseball, you're not worried about adding 15, 20 pounds of muscle like you will be playing football. I think Preston Frizzell has a very high ceiling. And then, of course, Ian Premer arrives this summer. And that was obviously the gem of the offensive class in 2026, the 2026 cycle. He's, in my opinion, the best tight end in the country. He's at least in the conversation with most people as the best tight end in the country. But it's the duo that is so exciting, because if it was just one guy, like, well, maybe he doesn't pan out. But what are the odds that they both don't pan out? And so I'm very excited about what they can bring to the table. And Preston Frizzell brings a very different skill set, and Ian Premer brings a very different skill set, both of them, to what they have on the roster. They are the polar opposites of James Flanagan and Cooper Flanagan. Like Ian Premer is Jack Larson's game with James Flanagan's body and toughness. You know what I mean? And Preston Frizzell looks like Tyler Eifert did coming out of high school. Almost identical, just not quite as tall. But Tyler was like 6'5", 220, string bean, played wide receiver at Bishop Dwang. I think he's a Dwanger guy. And just like, yeah, that guy's got a ton of talent. Now let's just see how big can he get. And then he got up to 260. I think this freshman tight end class is dynamic. The reason the other guys are so important is because you don't want to have to play freshmen because you have to. You want to play freshmen because they earn the right to play. The good news for Notre Dame is they're bringing in 2 freshmen that have the talent with good off seasons that they could force their way onto the field.
Absolutely. Preston Frizzell is a unicorn of the room. He has a skill set unlike anybody else's skill set in the room. And I'm very excited. We get a lot of questions, a lot of buy-sell holds about, who's going to benefit the most from being an early enrollee. And we talk a lot about, Elijah Golden and Aiden Pouncey for their work in the weight room. I mean, Notre Dame takes their heights and weights from like their visits. It's not what they're currently at right now, but officially what Notre Dame has for Preston Frizzell is he's 6'4", 220. It's a little bit light to be lining up and playing tight end as a true freshman. He's another player on the short list of players that are really going to benefit from being an early enrollee, but I'm very excited to see what either of them can do. Extremely excited. Ian Premer, we have to wait until the summertime for him to get here, but he's a little bit more. Sean Davis has a phrase, and I always forget what it is, but like fresh out of the box essentially is what, like ready to use on day one. That's kind of Ian Premer. I mean, on his visit, he was 6'6", 235. It would not surprise me at all that if Ian Premer is 6'6", 250 by the time fall camp rolls around. Would not surprise me in the slightest. It would very much shock me if Ian Premer was anywhere close to 250 by the time fall camp rolls around. Preston Frizzell, excuse me. That would surprise me. But these are 2 players that I think could impact the ceiling. I don't know how much they're going to contribute. To Brian's point, you don't want to have to play true freshmen, but if they earn a spot on the field where if you just look at them and say, yeah, guys, we can't keep them on the sidelines forever. They can help us win today. They can help us win immediately. That's the type of talent that guys like that have, especially Ian Premer. Very excited to see what they do this year. They have skill set. Like you said, Ian Premer is a combination of skill sets in the room, and Preston Frizzell is kind of the unicorn of the room. Very excited to watch what either of them do.
Yeah, I mean, in Preston this spring is going to be important for him because he does bring a unique skill set to the table. I mean, we're talking about Notre Dame, and both of them really, we're talking about Notre Dame's need for a boundary receiver.
Yeah.
Well, if they don't get one out of the portal, are you going to move either one of them to boundary full-time? No. Are there some 12 personnel stuff you can do with one of them in the boundary? Yeah. And they used to do that all the time. In 2012, an offense that Mike Denbrock was a part of, by the way, I want to remind people of that. In 2012, they would use 12 personnel, and they would have Troy Nicholas as the blocking as the tight end, and he would play like sort of the original tight end position. And Tyler would line up in the boundary, and he would just he'd run one-on-ones. I mean, do you remember in the title game, they had him run a back shoulder fade against D. Milner, and he caught it, and they said he wasn't in bounds. I still think he was in bounds, but whatever. It's a different conversation for a very different day, Trevor. But those guys bring that ability to the table where you can go 12 personnel, have one tight end attached as a blocker, have Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison on the field together, or Cam Williams and Caden Finley, or Micah Gilbert, or Elijah Burst, whoever. And then you've got one of those 2 guys boundary, and you're like, you've got some decisions to make as a defensive coaching staff. Do we put the corner on him that can run with him? Or do we put a safety on him or a linebacker on him? Notre Dame's begging you to put a linebacker or safety on him. And then if they put a corner on him, like, well, let's run the ball over there a little bit. You know what I mean? So there's just so many. And if they overplay it and go, kind of play cover 2 into the boundary, then you've got some great looks to the other side. They have that kind of ability. And James and Cooper can do some things in that regard. quick game and blocking and running some stop routes, and they can line up that way. But Ian and Preston can do it in a way where you literally have your whole pass offense at your disposal in those situations. It's not something you're going to do 50 snaps a game, but for 10, 12 snaps a game, you can present teams with some very interesting situations. And if they go corners over, also what you can do, or if they go safety or linebacker over also, Trev, is there's some stuff you can do where you can now motion your other tight end play side, get a 3-by-1 look. They've got an extra backer out here of the box, and now we're running the ball. Or you get that backer out of the box, and Notre Dame's running counter away from that guy with your other tight end in a 2-by-2 alignment. So there's a lot of things that you can do schematically what they present to you. Now, can they do that in 2026? That remains to be seen. But it's hard not to get excited about the skill set. The question is, when will that skill set be where it needs to be? And when will the knowledge of the offense and the strength and the technique, the technical prowess, be where it needs to be for them to be able to go help you on the field? But man, those two kids are exciting to think about and talk about, Trev. There's no doubt about it.
100%. Absolutely 100%. I remember lining up when Notre Dame would line up Tyler Eifert in the boundary. I mean, shoot, they did it against BYU. They did it in the season opener. I think Everett's first collegiate touchdown pass was to Tyler Eifert. They lined him up in the boundary against Navy and just threw him a little corner fade. Yeah, they definitely have that skill set. I'm with you completely. Very interested to see what contributions, if any, that they make in their true freshman season. Like, one thing that I've learned is, yes, players can come in extremely talented, but the thing that I've started to learn about this job is that doesn't also necessarily mean they're going to be playing 30 snaps a game as a true freshman. So very interested to see what they do in 2026. Brian, any final thoughts about the tight end room?
I think when we look at this group, how well they develop is going to have a very important role in the offense. I don't think the tight end development is the make or break to how good this team is going to be in 2026 on offense. I don't. That's the offensive line, number one, the receiver room, number two, the quarterback, number three, and then the tight ends. I just don't think it's that vital, because we have a baseline where we know if Cooper Flanagan's healthy and James Flanagan is healthy and Ty Wash is healthy, you can at least get good blocking from that group.
Yeah.
At the very least. And then you've got running backs can make up for some of that tight end production. You've got other receivers that can make up for some of that production. There's things that you can do. But I do think that the floor of this offense will be impacted by how well this tight end room steps up and develops over the offseason. So, the floor's here. I don't know that it necessarily changes the ceiling. I don't know if they have anybody that could be like an All-American caliber player in 2026.
Yeah.
So that's why I say I don't think they necessarily affect the ceiling a whole lot, but I do think they affect the floor a decent amount. But it's not a make or break position, but it is important. And I think it's especially important in the run game, because if Cooper Flanagan and James Flanagan have the growth that we think they're capable of and hope to see them, that makes the run blocking operation a lot better, which is going to be important in a year where you no longer have Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price.
Yeah.
And you don't have a quarterback that's going to add a lot of, threat to the run game. I mean, CJ can move the chains and do things like that, as we saw this year, but you're not having to game plan to stop CJ Carr in the run game like you did Riley. Even if Notre Dame tries to make him a part of the run game, which I don't think they're going to do, but even if they tried, you're like, fine, run the ball to CJ Carr. We're okay with that. Let that be the focal point of your run game like you do with Riley Leonard. Mike Denbrock's not going to do that. It's going to be sort of you're going to go, drop 8. We're going to run a draw with CJ, and he's going to steal 7-8 yards. You know what I mean? He's going to, get outside on a pull and make a guy miss and go run for 15 and then slide. That's CJ's game. My point is because you don't have the elite guys there, I think you're in a situation where it's really about their improved run blocking with what I hope is going to be improved run blocking from the offensive line now allows the production at running back to maintain. Even though you don't have the same talent at running back, it's still very good talent, but it's not Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. The production can remain the same if the pieces around them play to their full potential. And I think that's where the tight end room could provide a very different impact in 26 than it did in 2025, which is we're going to be able to hammer you because we got 87 and 88 at tight end, and they can move people. And linebackers don't want to be like, oh, crap, here comes James Flanagan around on a counter. I got to go, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to deal with this again, man. And then Aeneas is cutting inside of him, or Kedron's cutting inside of him, or Javion, or Nolan, or Jontez, or whoever. Jonas, Jontez. I just completely made up his name. Jonas. Who's Jontez? Did they get another running back? Jonas. I'm sorry, Mr. Walton. But that's I think what we're going to see, though, is a different looking tight end room in 2026. And at least for now, I'm not expecting the kind of impact in the pass game that I expected going into 2025 from this unit. But I think run game wise, it could provide a big jump. And I think you'll see more of the catches will be more clutch catches, those type of things is what I think we'll see.
Folks, that's going to do it for part one of today's show. Don't go anywhere. We're getting ready to preview the college football playoff semifinals in part two, and then we're going to wrap up today's show with a mailbag. So make sure you're continuing to get your questions, comments, concerns in. But before we get there, be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family. Anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. But now that it's the offseason, the transfer portal's going crazy. The best way to stay in tune with everything that we have going on and everything Notre Dame football, be sure to be a premium message board subscriber at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, in part two of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by FanDuel, we're talking about the college football playoff semifinals, and we're going to preview the final two of the three final games that are going to happen in this year's college football playoffs. And we're going to go in order of kickoff time. So, first we're going to be talking about the Verbo Fiesta Bowl, and then we're going to follow that up, talk about the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. But it's the final four teams, Brian, and I would be lying if I said that I had these four teams pegged. I got one of really at the start of this year's playoffs, I have one team correct in my final four, and that's the Indiana Hoosiers. We're going to talk about them here in a little bit. But two teams that I did not see making it to this point are two teams that are playing in the Fiesta Bowl, and that is the 10th-seeded Miami Hurricanes versus the 6th-seeded Ole Miss Rebels. You can watch that 7:30 p.m. kickoff on ESPN. That's this Thursday, January 8th. It's going to be in Glendale, Arizona, inside of State Farm Stadium. Right now, Miami is favored by 3.5 points, and the over-under is set at 51.5 by our friends over at FanDuel. So, Brian, very interesting matchup happening on Thursday night. Sorry, Brian, you're muted.
I got to correct you, Trevor, because you're talking about a matchup between Miami and Ole Miss. But what just came across X is that the playoff committee decided that Alabama's field goal drive was so impressive against Indiana and that they held Indiana below 40 points, that they're actually going to pull Ole Miss out because they don't have a head coach, and they're going to put Bama in because they were really impressed. Like, nobody keeps Indiana under 40 points in a playoff game except for Notre Dame last year.
Well, I mean, Brian, you got to think about strength of schedule in the postseason.
Yeah,
Alabama had to play in Norman. They had to play Indiana.
And Ole Miss's strength of schedule is clearly not strong enough, so they don't have a chance against Indiana. So what they're going to do is they're going to give Alabama another crack at it against Miami. And, that's kind of what's going to happen there, because anyone else would have lost by 45, not 35. I mean, everyone else would have lost by 35 to Indiana.
Well, and you got to factor in, because of their rigorous regular season, they were just so exhausted by the time they got, and they had to travel.
In all seriousness, I like this matchup. It's very unique. It's UM versus UM, right? I mean, University of Miami against University of Ole Miss. These teams took very different paths to the playoffs. It's an intriguing matchup for me, Trevor, because they're both on a stage they've never been in. Ole Miss ever, and Miami hasn't been on a stage like this since 2002, right? I mean, I don't know that there's a more than a kid or two on Miami's team that was born the last time Miami was a title contender. And you talked about this last week, is like, look, how are they going to perform? Now, they've both had to go win big games to get here. But every time you advance, the pressure gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so who handles that the best? Who handles that environment the best? Which team can go into this matchup and say, we're going to take away what you do well away, and we're going to make you beat us with something else? who's going to win in the trenches? Is it Miami's power against Ole Miss's speed and scheme and all that kind of stuff? This is a very unique matchup because these two teams play football very differently, at least the version of Miami we've seen in the playoffs so far. I mean, Miami has scored a combined 34 points in their first two games and won them both. Ole Miss scored 38, 39 against Georgia alone. They've scored almost 100 points so far in the playoffs. And talk about two completely different, contrast in style and how they perform. That's the kind of matchup that I enjoy watching in a playoff game. Not two SEC teams that are basically the same team, sucky offense, good defense, that played each other already. I want to see a unique matchup, and that's why this Miami Ole Miss game very much intrigues me. Very much intrigues me.
Agreed. A lot of different storylines coming out of this one. It's two teams that a lot of people just didn't think should have been there in the first place, or at least where they were ranked in the first place, I guess would be a better way to put that. You have Ole Miss losing their head coach right before. You have all the drama with Notre Dame and the SEC and the ACC surrounding Miami. But they were able to push all of that aside. Both teams were able to overcome the adversity off the field, and then they were able to have a lot of success on field. I was very impressed with Ole Miss and what they did, and they were able to beat Georgia kind of in their backyard in a setting that they're very familiar playing in. And then with Miami, I'd be lying if I said that it was pretty. But guess what? In the playoffs, it doesn't matter how you win. That's why I love the playoffs. All last season when Notre Dame was gearing up to go on their run in the regular season, you have to beat this team and it has to look this way and you have to score this amount of points and you have to hold them to this amount of points. You could win in the playoffs 100-99 or 3-2. As long as you walk away with a win, you're advancing to the next round. And that's one thing that I love about the playoffs. And both of these teams kind of encompass that. Ole Miss, it's looked very different for them, especially defensively the last few. Now, you start to talk about quality of opponent. Playing Tulane again is a little bit different than playing, Kirby Smart and the Dogs and Gunnar Stockton and that offense. But in one game, they gave up, 10 points? In the other one, they gave up 34.
Mm-hmm.
Miami, I would argue, has had the more consistent path so far in the playoffs. They held Texas A&M to 3, and then they held Ohio State to 14. They were the first team to shut out Ohio State in a first half since 2016. When you're doing something for the first time that every other team
was also a playoff game, by the way.
Yep,
because that was against Clemson.
Right.
Yeah, because they got shut out for the whole game.
The game, yeah. What was that, like 31-0?
31 zip
or something. Dude.
Yep.
Oof.
Yeah.
I've been told that when you get beat that bad, you should have a postseason ban. Different conversation for a different day, but I have heard that.
Yeah, well played.
But thank you. But in all seriousness, I would argue that Miami's path so far has been a little bit more consistent. They've also been the more battle-tested team so far in the playoffs. Playing Texas A&M on the road at Kyle Field, I don't care what time of day it is different than hosting Tulane.
Yep. Yep.
So very, very interested to see how this matchup plays out. But look, I'll eat a little bit of crow. Miami has absolutely impressed me so far in the postseason.
Well, and they've played in their backyard their first two games also, Ole Miss has. They played at home in the opener, and then they played in Atlanta and New Orleans in round two, a place, like a place that an area they're familiar with. You know what I mean? Like, that's not very far. I don't know how many of you are familiar with a map, but Mississippi's pretty darn close to Louisiana. Now they got to go out to Arizona and play in a different environment, a more balanced environment against an opponent that they haven't really faced. And so I think it's going to be a very different type of situation, Trevor, for them, where I think that, like, to your point, Miami has had to go away from home really for both games. I mean, they're in Florida. Now, the Texas game is not super, super far. I mean, it's just a shot across the Gulf of Mexico, but that's still a bit of a hike. You know what I mean? And then, of course, their first round game, they had to go to Texas as well. So, I mean, they've played two games in Texas, and now they've got to go, out to Phoenix for this game. So I do think they're a little bit more battle tested, but I would argue that Ole Miss to me has had to overcome a lot of adversity to get to this point. And now it's even more drama, with the school talking about suing coaches and coaches bailing on the team and this other kind of nonsense, which is just, just kind of ridiculous. So, I look at it and I'm like, it makes it hard to kind of really grind this game down because of the difference in styles. And to your other point, Trev, when you look at Miami getting here, Since Miami lost to Texas A&M, to SMU, excuse me, they gave up 26 points, 388 yards of offense, 5.4 yards per play. Since that time, the most points they've given up in a game is 17 at Virginia Tech. They held NC State to 7, Syracuse to 10. They held Pitt to 7, Ohio State to 14, and Texas A&M to 3. And then you look at Ole Miss, and since they lost to Georgia, they've scored 34, 30, 49, 34, 38, 41, and 39 points per game. And then, you look at their offense. They have had at least 473 yards of offense in their last 5 games, and they haven't been below 417 since their loss to Georgia in October. So since their most recent loss, both of these teams have not only been winning, but they've been winning relatively impressively. Ole Miss had the 8-point road win over Oklahoma. The next closest game they had was an ugly 10-point win over Florida. So until the Georgia game, obviously. But I just think this is such a unique contrast in styles. Miami has started to understand who they should be all along. They're starting to play bully ball. Ole Miss wants to make it fast and get out of the pocket and mix up the tempos and mix up your coverages and all that. You have a very disciplined defense against an offense that wants to make it hard for you to be disciplined. And then you have another offense that in a lot of ways doesn't look all that complex, but then can create some matchup advantages. So that's what I'm looking for. And as you look at the different keys, Trev, I think the biggest one for Miami, I'm going to kind of go one at a time with each team, and then I will get your thoughts on it. Number one, Miami. You've got to be able to establish the run and not let Ole Miss run. That's been your recipe all along. You've got to be able to do that. Run the football. Run it down Ole Miss's throat. Slow the game down. Keep Trinidad Chambliss off the field. Keep him on the sidelines. And again, don't let Carson Beck feel like he has to go out there and make plays to win you the game. Let Carson Beck think, I just got to do my job. And sometimes that means making plays. Sometimes that means making the right check. Sometimes that means handing the ball off. Sometimes that means I got to put my shoulder down and run somebody over. But don't make him think, hey, this is all on me. You've got to come out and win in the trenches. That's Miami's recipe. If they win the battle in the trenches, I think they win this football game. And now that's not easier. That's easier said than done. But I think that's the key number one for them. And the number one key for Ole Miss is you've got to protect Trinidad Chambliss in ways that Ohio State and Texas A&M could not do for their quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, for Miami, the recipe for success is simple. I mean, look, they've done a really good job of putting Carson Beck in a situation where the game is just not in his hands. I mean, through 2 playoff games, you go and you look at what he's done. He's had, 241 total passing yards in 2 games, 1 touchdown in each game, no picks. He's been able to be a game manager, and that's what best suits him. Why did he start to fail at Georgia? Because Georgia needed a Gunnar Stockton-like to be able to put the team on their back and make some crucial plays. Neither Texas A&M or Ohio State has not been able to put Carson Beck in a situation where he has to be the guy. And Miami's done a really good job of running their offense with that in mind. Yeah. Mark Fletcher's had an outstanding postseason.
It took him a half to figure that out, I feel like. You know what I mean? I felt like they went into the A&M game thinking, let's spread it out and throw the ball and do all this, and it didn't work. And then, the last quarter of that game, they just said, okay, screw it. We're going to run it down your throat. Yep. Hey, this works pretty good. Andrew Gilmore asked the question, Trevor, is Carson Beck due for one of his old games, his old dud games? And my response is exactly what Trevor and I are talking about. It depends on whether or not Miami decides to put the game on his shoulders or not. If it comes down to a Carson Beck's going to have to drop back and throw the ball 40 times, then he might be due for one of those. But I got to say, look, I'm not a Carson Beck fan by any stretch of imagination. He has looked like what I think Miami thought they were getting in the last several games. I mean, we keep waiting on Carson Beck to have that dud game. And look, Trev, it could come. But I just want to point out that Carson Beck hasn't been below 70% completion percentage since the SMU game. I mean, now they haven't asked him to do a whole lot in the playoffs. He's thrown for 241 yards in the playoffs, but he did need to throw the ball a lot more against NC State, Virginia Tech, and Pitt, and he was very good. Now, can he do that on this stage? mean, that kind of remains to be seen, but that's the whole point. They won 2 playoff games with their quarterback throwing for a combined 241 yards in those 2 games. Notre Dame doesn't have much of a chance of winning if they throw for 108 and 130. Was it 100? What was it? 103 and 138 yards in 2 playoff games. Because they, I don't know that they can win that way. Miami has. I'm being a bit hyperbolic on that, but Miami has. So it's like, what are you going to ask him to do? If you're going to ask him to go away from that recipe and say, Carson, the game's on your shoulders, then yeah, that could be back. But he's had that look in his eye, Trev, that you're like, dude, this is a guy that's dialed in and is willing to do whatever they ask him to do.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the even bigger question talking about Miami's offense is what is Ole Miss's defense going to force him to do? The biggest issue that Texas A&M and Ohio State had is they let Miami's offensive line dictate the pace of that game. Absolutely dictate the pace of that game. At this point, you have a sample size of 2 games of what Miami is looking to do in the postseason. Really a game and a half. So I'm with you. I think they went into the Texas A&M game and they're like, okay, we have like a 6-year quarterback and Malachi Tony's been eating people alive and we're going to go nuts on this A&M defense. We watched Notre Dame's redshirt freshman quarterback throw for over 290 yards on the same defense. I'll be very interested to see what Pete Golding does to counter that. Very interested. I'm doing everything that I can to put the ball into Carson Beck's hands. Because when he can just kind of ride the bus and not have to drive the bus, he's a very, very successful quarterback. And he's had a good playoffs. But at some point, I don't know what team that's going to be. It could be Ole Miss in the semifinals. It could be Oregon or Indiana in the national championship game. At some point, Carson Beck is going to have to step up and make plays at some point. I don't know when that's going to be. But it's bound to happen at some point. Very interested to see what happens. And I'm with you with Ole Miss. You have to do a better job protecting Trinidad Chambliss. Much better job at doing that because this Miami defensive front is legit. Now, I can't claim this is my own because I saw Insured by Big put this in the chat. I will be very interested to see, and he brings up a very good point, the pace that Ole Miss plays on offense. Will that have any effect on the Miami defensive rotation? I think that's why interesting.
That's a great question because Miami has those big, thicker power linemen that can wear down. That's exactly why I think the number one key for Miami is running the football effectively.
Oh, yeah.
If you rip off a big run, you rip off a big run. But there's nothing better for the Miami defense than for its offense to go on a nice little 6-7 minute yard, 10-play drive where they're running the football down Ole Miss's throat.
Yep.
And the mistake that Georgia made is Georgia tried to get into a track meet with Ole Miss because they thought, well, that worked for us last time. We can do it again this time. And that didn't work out real well, Trev. This is you want to take them out of your game. And that's key number one. And key number 2 for Miami is going to be defensively, keep Trinidad Chambliss in the pocket. I'm not sitting there saying like Trinidad Chambliss, if you keep him in the pocket, he's garbage. You can't beat you. I'm not saying that at all because he can beat you no matter where. You have a better shot of beating him if you can keep him in the pocket. You have a better job of slowing him down if you can keep him in the pocket. If he gets to go kind of play, like Sean Davis and I were talking about just differences in generations and how our generation grew up. I mean, we didn't grow up playing 7-on-7 year round and doing all this. We grew up playing street ball. I mean, you get 5 dudes. We're playing tackle football on concrete. You know what I mean? Like wherever we could play. And Trinidad Chambliss is like an old soul. Like he plays football like he grew up with us. Like he grew up playing in the backyard, not doing 7-on-7 stuff, but just, man, you're just playing wherever you can find a field or a parking lot or a street big enough for us to all fit in. You know what I mean? You're running post routes into cars when we were kids. You know what I mean? And that's how he plays. Like just run around, make plays, get open, find. Like I didn't even see how he saw that guy coming from the backside of the field. That's when he's at his best because he can also hurt you from the pocket. But when he's moving around, it makes his pocket presence so much better. If you can find a way to keep him in the pocket, and if he's going to leave the pocket, make him go vertical, not outside. I think that's Miami's best chance of creating enough misses by him to where you can have some success. Because the weakness for Miami coming into this postseason on defense, and again, when you're in the semifinals, you don't really have any like bad weaknesses. It's just things you're not as good at. It still is their secondary. And Jeremiah Smith did enough in that game to say he got his, but they kept everybody else mostly in check and shut down the Ohio State offense. That's not a great Ohio State offense. This is the best offense they've played since probably Louisville, SMU.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, they haven't played good offenses. And I mean, Pitt's not a great offense, not against a team like Notre Dame and Miami, and they couldn't score on either one of those teams. They didn't get the 10 points offensively against either Notre Dame because they scored 15 against Notre Dame, and 6 of that came on a pick 6. So this is a different animal. That doesn't take away from what Miami's done, by the way. Miami's done a great job. It's just saying, like, this is a different animal. You can't necessarily just repeat what you did against Ohio State. I also think Ole Miss has a better offensive line than Ohio State has. So that's kind of where I'm at on that one.
Yeah, key number 2 for Miami for me is it's along the same lines, but what version of Miami's defense against a game like a playmaker at quarterback do we see? Towards the end of the year, we watched it really hunker down. They did a really good job against Marcel Reed. Now, you and I have talked about this before. Marcel Reed had more holes in his games than what people were willing to admit. I mean, yeah, he threw for all those yards against Notre Dame. He completed 50% of his passes. He's not an accurate passer.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the issues that Marcel Reed had came to light. That being said, Miami did a good job of not letting him take over the game with his legs. Earlier in the season, however, when Miami's defense would face a playmaker at quarterback, because look, I'm going to ruffle some feathers here. Julian Sain is not a playmaker at quarterback. He is a game manager. Julian Sain is a quality quarterback with Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, and the best defense in the country. One of. Like that's who he is.
And because their schedule wasn't strong, they were able to protect him all season. We talked about this, Trev. Yep. Last week when we talked about the game, they tried to play a style all year, and when they got into a game where they couldn't do that, they had nothing else to lean back on.
Yeah. But then you go through and you look earlier in the season, which I would argue is kind of some of the last times that Miami played playmakers at quarterback. CJ Carnes, first start ever, had 221 passing yards, 3 total touchdowns, 1 rushing, 2 passing. I know South Florida ran out of the building. That's just a difference in overall talent level. Byron Brown threw for 274 yards and a touchdown and a pick. I mean, shoot, even Castellanos against Florida State, one of the reasons why the game was so close, he had 272 passing yards, 57 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. Now, the common theme in all of those is all 3 of those quarterbacks that I just listed off, Castellanos, Byron Brown, and CJ Carr, couldn't protect the football. They all had big turnovers.
Yep.
So I'm going to be very interested what version of Miami's defense shows up. I'm more inclined to say it's the one that we've seen in the postseason because that's who they've been recently.
And to your point, Trinidad Chambliss has thrown 408 passes this year. 3 picks.
Yep. Does a great job at taking care of the football.
Yep. Despite playing a style that you would think leads to more turnovers.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the counter to that. Miami's offense has not thrown the ball at all in the first 2 rounds. Haven't really. I mean, I shouldn't say you haven't needed to. They didn't need to ultimately because they won the games. But you're playing a different type of team. I don't think it's possible to beat Ole Miss scoring 10 points. They're not going to beat Ole Miss 10-3. I don't know that they can beat Ole Miss 24-14. I think you're going to need at least 24-27 points to win this game. This is a different defense than they've played. We've talked a lot about this is a different offense than you've played all year. The flip side of that, Trevor, is this is a very different defense than what you've played all year, and in a while. And what I mean by that is postseason. This isn't a great defense. I mean, this is a defense that gave up over 400 yards to Tulane, over 400 yards to Mississippi State, over 500 to Georgia the first time they played, over 500 to Arkansas. This is not a great defense, and it's especially not an elite pass defense. And this is the game where I think you could see Malachi Toney get back on track. He's really had 1 good quarter of football in the playoffs. Not his fault. I mean, it's the nature of the offense. Teams are taking him out of the game. This is a game where CJ Daniels might make his presence felt. This is a game where you could see Malachi Toney make more of an impact. I do think to win this game, Miami's got to run the ball, control the clock, but they're going to have to make some plays in the pass game in ways they didn't in the first 2 games. And that's going to be you got to protect Carson Beck. He's got to be poised. And then you've got to have some stuff scheme-wise from Shannon Dawson, who's done a very good job for most of the season of scheming up his receivers to have success, to be able to go out there and have success. And so for Miami, that's going to be true. And for Ole Miss, you've got to get the ball. You've got to find ways to force Miami into mistakes. You can't let them go down the field and just eat up clock. You've got to create, and getting the ball doesn't just mean turnovers. Getting the ball is getting a key tackle for loss on 2nd and 8 that puts them in a 3rd and 14 or 3rd and 11, 3rd and 10 that they can't convert, and they're punting it back to you. What I mean is, don't let them go down the field and just take 7-8 minutes off the clock. You know, if I'm Ole Miss, I'm almost going to load the box and dare Miami's receivers to beat me, and dare Carson Beck to beat me.
100%. 100%. That's if I'm Pete Golding, I'm loading 8 in the box and I'm bracketing Malachi Toney. Again, I've said this about Miami really since the Notre Dame game. If a team loses to Miami because CJ Daniels has 9 receptions for 140 yards and a touchdown or 2, Miami's just a better team that day. If you lose to Miami because I forgot the name of one of their other receivers, but if you lose because Carson Beck just has the game of his life and he doesn't turn the ball over, throws 3 touchdowns, goes for 2, well over 2 bills, fine. If you lose to Miami because Mark Fletcher has over 150 rushing yards,
that's a coaching. You either got your butts kicked in the trenches or you just didn't do a good job schematically.
Yeah.
To your point, make Keelan Marion beat me. Make Elijah Lofton beat me. Make Joshua Moore beat me. Make CJ Daniels beat me. And if they do, you tip your cap and say you're a better team than we are.
100%.
But you're not going to beat us because you ran the ball down our throat and controlled the clock. Because here's the thing. I'm almost kind of willing to give up a couple big pass plays because that's going to get our offense back on the field, which means more snaps for us to wear Miami's defensive line down for the second half. So I would absolutely – that's kind of how I would go.
The last key to victory for me is for Ole Miss, and it's on the offensive side of the ball. We have yet to see a team really be able to establish anything that resembles a ground game against Miami in big games. Ohio State certainly didn't. Notre Dame struggled to do it all the way back in week 1. Texas A&M couldn't really get any of their running backs going either. Now, it's going to look different. When you're going up against as good of a rush defense as what Miami has, you're not going for 200 yards. It's not what I'm talking about. Can it be a viable option that you can turn to? Or does Charlie Weiss Jr. and Pete Golding just say, all right, Trinidad, you're just going to throw the ball 50 times today? I'll be very interested to see how they counter that. Because for as much as we talk about teams need to load the box against Miami and force the issue for Carson Beck, how does Miami and their defensive coordinator counter this Ole Miss offense? Because I don't think it's as simple as like, well, you can't just say put the ball in Trinidad Chambliss' hands because that dude's been a playmaker all season long. But then it's also not as simple as, okay, so then do you just let Kejuan Lacey just run crazy? I think that's very interesting. Like that's a matchup not as talked about as much. I understand why, but very interested to see how Miami's defense counters the high-powered Ole Miss. This was a very hard game for me to give a prediction for. Yeah, because it's so different.
Yeah, but we got to do it anyway.
We sure do. We sure do. Do you want me to get us kicked off with predictions?
Yes, sir, I do.
I'm torn because basically the two things that I've been adamant about both of these teams so far through the postseason just haven't came true yet. Which team kind of lets that come true, or does neither team let it come true? For Ole Miss, it's always been, this is the game where you're going to not feel Lane Kiffin's presence. This is the game where you're going to feel that you haven't had your head coach. And then for Miami, it's, Carson Beck's always due for one. He just kind of hasn't been yet. I am going to go with Miami in this game, however. They are, like I said, through the first 2 rounds, they've won at the most consistent level compared to Ole Miss. And I'm always going to err on the side of the team that has a defense that can kind of shut down high-powered offenses. There were holes in Ohio State's offense. We talked about that. The performance that impressed me more was them holding Texas A&M to 3, not Ohio State to 14. Texas A&M was at home, and they've had a very good offense all year. Holes, absolutely. But holding a team to 3 points on their home field in the playoffs, that's something that people just don't really do. That impressed me more than what they did to Ohio State. And then I think it's just going to be more of the status quo for Miami's offense. because a team so far has not shown that they can completely stop and contain Mark Fletcher and their rushing offense. And if Carson Beck can just sit there and be a game manager and, convert a couple of third downs with his arms and with his legs, then Miami has proven that that's their recipe for success, and it makes them very hard to beat.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm wrong about that, the game goes and it turns into a shootout, and Carson Beck has to make plays, and eventually he will just make a mistake. But he just hasn't had a big enough sample size yet in the playoffs as far as throwing the football to put it in harm's way. But what teams have shown is when he starts to throw the ball, 28, 30, 32 times a game, he's just going to make a mistake. That's been consistent throughout his entire career. So I have Miami winning this game. I have them winning it 27-24. I think it's going to be very close. I think Ole Miss is going to have a chance to win it at the end, and I think that'd be kind of poetic. What takes today? Ole Miss's high-powered offense or the defense that Miami has relied on all season long to get the stop? I'm going to give it to the Canes defense. So I have Miami winning this one 27-24, Brian. What about you?
Close. I have a little bit more scoring in this game. I have Miami winning 31-27. At the end of the day, I just I like the Ole Miss run that they're on. I don't think they beat two great teams. I predicted Georgia to beat them, but you and I have been saying for a while, Georgia's a good team. This isn't vintage Georgia.
No.
And the reason why Georgia's not a vintage Georgia, because they're just not as good in the trenches as they've been in the past. Miami is. So as long as Miami can handle the moment, I still think they're the better team in the trenches. I still think they're a team that can disrupt a very good quarterback, a very good receiving core, a very good running back room. We've seen them do it multiple times this year, Ohio State being one, but even more importantly, going back to the opener against Notre Dame. I still think that's one of the two or three most talented teams in the country. They beat them. I think A&M is one of the best offenses in the country. They held them to 3. Ohio State doesn't have an elite offense, but they're a good offense, and they held them to 14. So I just think Miami's got enough to make enough stops against Ole Miss to where it's now about, can your offense go put enough points on the board? And I think at the end of the day, I think they'll be able to do that. I think they'll run the ball. I think you're going to see a couple big plays down the field from Carson to where he's going to be able to take some shots. I think this is a game where you're going to see Shannon Dawson back in his bag a little bit because the defense are going against. You didn't want to put Carson Beck in those situations against A&M and Miami and Ohio State. Those defenses were pretty good and had pretty good pass rushers. Ole Miss is a good defense, but it's not an elite defense. You don't get to the semifinals with a bad defense. Can we all be pretty much honest about that? Right? Like there's exceptions to the rule, but you're not getting here with a bad defense. But they're not an elite defense, and they're not as fast and as athletic as I think what they faced the first 2 rounds, honestly. And so I think you're going to see some of those big play opportunities from Miami, but they're going to run the ball early, and then that's going to create some. I think they're going to be able to get Malachi Toney in space. I think they're going to be able to create some shots down the field. And a guy that I kind of have an interesting look at is Elijah Lofton. If Elijah Lofton can, I think he might have a couple big plays in this game because you can't guard everybody. And I could see Shannon Dawson doing some things to create some big play opportunities for him. I think it's going to be a great game. I think it's going to come down to Ole Miss has a chance at the end of the game to win it, and Miami makes the stops. I think it's going to look a lot like the Notre Dame game, honestly, at the end, where it's like it's back and forth, and then, Miami just makes a couple more plays than Ole Miss makes. But I think this is going to be a heck of a game. Could see it going both ways, but I like Miami in this game.
Do you also see it similar to I do? Like if our predictions are wrong, it's because this kind of turns into more of like that shootout as Carson Beck has a little bit too much pressure on him type of deal? I
think if Ole Miss doesn't score a whole lot, it won't be close. Like if Ole Miss is held to 14, 17 points, it won't be a competitive game. Like you know what I mean? Like I think so if it's a competitive game and I'm wrong, I think it's going to look more like the Georgia Ole Miss game in the regular season. You know what I mean? Or even the playoff game.
Sure.
If Ole Miss can't score, then I think Miami whoops them. If Miami can't score, I think Ole Miss whoops them. Like whoever scores in the teens is going to lose by double digits. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of how I see it playing out.
Brian, let's talk about the second game that's going down. And this one's actually on Friday. It's the day after. But talking about the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, January 9th, kickoff is at 7:30 p.m. You can watch it, of course, on ESPN. This one's down in Atlanta, Georgia, in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It's between the number 1 seeded Indiana Hoosiers and the number 5 seeded Oregon Ducks. Currently, Indiana is favored by -3.5, and the over-under set at 46.5 by our friends over at FanDuel. So we get another rematch, Brian. That's something that's been consistent with this playoff. There's been at least one rematch in every single round so far. Now, bright side is the national championship won't be a rematch. So this is the final round of the playoffs. That won't be a rematch, but Big Ten matchup for the semifinals. They played in the regular season. Very, very interesting matchup to talk about between the Hoosiers and the Ducks.
Yeah, I think this is the game between the two best teams left in the tournament, I would argue. Both, look, Ole Miss and Miami are both capable of beating Indiana or Oregon. I just think right now these are the two teams playing the best football because they're both playing well on both sides of the ball. Miami's defense is playing championship caliber football. Their offense, not so much. I would argue that Oregon's is. And I would also argue that as impressive as what Alabama did to, or what Indiana did to Alabama was, I would argue that what Oregon did to Texas A&M to me was even more impressive. And you may not agree with this, Trevor, but I think Texas Tech's a much better football team than Alabama.
100%.
And they dominated Texas Tech. You know, I mean, just absolutely dominated that football game. Defensively, Texas Tech had no chance in that football game. And while Oregon didn't light up the Texas Tech defense, which is pretty good, they did what they needed to do and controlled the clock and knew, hey, they can't move the ball on us. We're not going to do something to give them a short field. It's kind of like how Miami beat Ohio State. Like, look, we're not going to do something to put this in. We're going to run the ball and make them beat us, and they couldn't do it. So you have two teams coming in this game that were absolutely dominant in their quarterfinal wins and dominant because of their defense. Now, Indiana's offense looked a lot better, but I would argue that Texas Tech has a better defense than Alabama. But that's what makes this interesting. So, like, how does the familiarity work? I mean, sometimes it results in it's hard to beat a team twice. We've said that all the time. It happens sometimes. You know, Georgia obviously couldn't do it against Ole Miss. But here's the difference. Ole Miss was more competitive, in my opinion, against Georgia in the regular season game than Oregon was against Indiana. And I believe the regular season game was in Athens when they played. And the regular season game between Oregon and Indiana was in Oregon, and Indiana still thoroughly outplayed them. I think Oregon's a much better football team now, though, than they were then. But Indiana's also playing at a high level. They've beaten, in their last two games, Alabama and Ohio State they don't play anybody. Well, they beat Alabama and Ohio State. You know, I mean, Alabama's so good. They are such a good football team that even when they barely beat a 5-7 team, and even when they lose by 21 in their conference title game, they're so impressive in those barely wins over a bad team and getting blown out that you still got to put them in the playoffs. That's how good Alabama is. And they beat that team by 35 in a game that nobody saw coming. That's what Indiana's. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. I'm still being very petty about that. But the point is, Bama was overrated. They didn't belong in the playoff. And you know what Indiana did? Made them look like a team that didn't belong in the playoff. Mm-hmm. Like, that tells me something. Indiana played in the Rose Bowl in bad conditions and whooped Alabama's butt from start to finish. That told me something. But you know what? Oregon did the same thing. And this is the question we've had about Dan Lanning. Can he go and win those big games? Well, he's won several now. You know, and now this is the biggest one of his career, obviously. And every game is and at this point in time, it's kind of the biggest game of his career. But he finally got that playoff win under his belt. Does that take some pressure off them, or does it add pressure? Now you got to go do it again. I think with Notre Dame last year, when they beat Georgia, there was no pressure going into the semifinals against Penn State. That's why I don't think they kind of crumbled when they fell behind 10-0. They're like, who cares, guys? You know what we've been through this season? Like, we're good. And I wonder if Oregon's going to have that. This is a team that's been very tested the last month or two when you look at what they've had to do to get here.
I mean, since the start of November, yeah.
Yes. And I would argue that much more battle tested, I would argue, than what Indiana has been. I mean, their last 6 games was against Iowa, who won 9 games, against a Minnesota team that won 8 games, against a USC team that won 9 games, against a Washington team that won 9 games.
And very hard to beat at home.
Yep. It has only Ohio State has done that in the last 4 years. They beat a 12-1 James Madison team by the game was not nearly as close as the final score. And then they blew out Texas Tech and 23-0. But that doesn't always mean anything, Trev. You know what I mean? Like Notre Dame wasn't super battle tested going into the Georgia game last year, and Georgia was, and look what happened. So I love this matchup. I really do. It's the best coach team in America against maybe arguably the most talented team left in the playoffs, arguably in Oregon. Oregon's got better athletes all around, not by a ton, but they just do. Indiana's the better coach team. They're both playing really physical football right now. Both teams are playing very well in the trenches. This is more of a similarity in style as opposed to the other game being a contrast of styles. And both of these teams want to run the football. Both of these teams have very good quarterbacks that they're not going to ask to carry the team all day. Both are playing really good defense. This is going to be a heck of a game. Heck of a game, in my opinion, Trevor. I love this matchup. For Indiana, it starts off with you have got to be able to be balanced in this game. You've got to find a way to be balanced. When Oregon is vulnerable, it's when teams can find a way to run the football on them and be balanced. James Madison scored 36 points on Oregon and ran for 186 yards. USC ran for 52 yards. Texas Tech ran for 78 yards. Like if you want to really have success in this football team, you've got to be able to be balanced against them. That's going to be a key for Miami. Indiana.
Oh, yeah, well, absolutely. Balanced for sure. And what that's going to do is kind of leads into my number one key. Fernando Mendoza has to play better than what he's played in some of these bigger moments. Now, I understand what he did and what he looked like against Alabama. I'm sure we can all agree by now that Alabama is just not the defense that we were told that they were. The Crimson Tide defense, yeah, it was bad. Okay, can we be honest about that for a second? But we talk about, I always evaluate quarterbacks. This is just a personal belief of mine, of what you do in big games. With all due respect to what other teams do, it's like, I don't care what Fernando Mendoza did against Indiana State. I don't care what he did against Kennesaw State or Villanova. I don't care. I evaluate quarterbacks off of how they play in the biggest moments. And it's been a little up and down for Fernando Mendoza, truthfully. Now, where he's been helped out is that IU predominantly in the season has been a very balanced team. You don't get to 14-0 on accident. You're 15-0. They are right now, I believe. Either way, you don't get to 14-0, 15-0 by accident. But in some of the bigger moments, Fernando Mendoza hasn't played that great. He was fine against Iowa. He didn't play great the first time they played, for as well as Indiana played as a team the first time that they played Oregon. Fernando Mendoza didn't play lights out. I mean, Roman Hemby had 2 rushing touchdowns. Fernando Mendoza went 20 of 31 for 215 yards, threw a touchdown, and then a pick 6, which kind of left Oregon back into the game. Against Penn State, up until that final drive, Fernando Mendoza hadn't been playing great. So my number one key to victory falls under what you're talking about. It's just a little bit more granular. Is can Fernando Mendoza be like the Heisman winner? Can he be the guy? Now, I'm not saying he's going to look like what he looked like against Illinois. I don't think that's a fair standard to set against a defense like Oregon. But can he not make that glaring mistake? Can he do a better job of taking care of the football? Because you're going up against a very good defense. Best defense that you've faced since the Big Ten championship. And it's not like Fernando Mendoza lit the world on fire down in Indianapolis against Ohio State's defense either.
I agree with everything you said. I would simply reply by saying I think the same exact thing is true for Dante Moore.
Yeah.
Because I don't think Dante Moore played great in their win over Texas Tech. Now, he made some big throws, but he also missed some big throws. He had a turnover in that game. He had no touchdown passes and threw a pick in that game. He had 2 picks against James Madison. He's thrown 3 interceptions in 2 games. And that's not something you want to do against Indiana. You can't turn the ball over against Indiana. This is a team that has 17 interceptions this year, has only allowed 7 passing touchdowns. And so and this is a team that is pretty good usually in their pass defense. Now, Ohio State had some success throwing the ball on them, but they just couldn't punch it into the end zone. Purdue had some success throwing the ball on them. Maryland had some success throwing the ball on them. Michigan State had some success throwing the ball on them. So, but they're very opportunistic. They have a good secondary. They have a pretty good pass rush. They're schemed very well, but you've got to be able to throw the ball on them and make – look, you're not going to have a ton of opportunities to hit big plays against them, and when they come, you've got to hit them. And so I would agree that Dante's in the same situation, that Dante's got to step up and play better. And Dante's in a situation where in some of the big games they've played this year, he's been great. I thought he was outstanding against Washington, brilliant against Washington. Thought he was outstanding against Minnesota. In the Iowa game, when you looked at him and it's like, man, he didn't do a whole lot throwing the ball that game because of the conditions. He made a couple throws, but what did he do? He stepped up and made some plays with his legs in that game in terrible weather. And so I think both of these guys have shown some grittiness. They've shown some, even when they're not playing great, they make plays. That's going to be key, is who can make more of those plays and limit the bad plays. And for Fernando Mendoza, I think that's just more about just not missing guys or not taking sacks. Like he had a couple times against Bama. I'm like, dude, why are you taking that sack? Like, throw the ball away. Like, you can't take a sack there. For Dante, it's like, dude, don't throw the ball to the defense. But they're both going to have 3 or 4 big play opportunities in this game, in the pass game. Who takes the most advantage of those 3 to 4, maybe 5 opportunities? Sometimes they don't work out because you don't read it right. Sometimes you miss the throw. Sometimes a guy drops it. You get sacked, whatever. You're going to get about, I'll say 4 to 5 chances a game against a team like this to have a big play in the pass game. It's all got to work. The pass pro's got to be there. The guy's got to run the right routes. The quarterback's got to make the right read and get the ball there, and they got to catch it. But in games like this, those opportunities are very limited. You got to hit them. Whose offense can make more of those plays? And whose defense can step up and limit maybe some of those opportunities in this game? Because if you get more than 5, then your offense is going to be cooking. I think that's a big key for me in this game, Trev, is between these two teams, is which quarterback can make some of those plays. And somebody brought this up in the chat, can Dan Lanning avoid the unnecessary gambles? There's a time and a place to go for it on 4th down. There's a time and a place to be tricky. There's also a time and a place where it's okay to punt the ball away. It's okay to just line up and do it. Can he avoid some of those moments that have proved costly for him in the past? Hey, there's no need for you to go for 2 here, buddy. You know what I'm saying? Like, tell the analytics guy to go take a seat. Kick the extra point here. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's going to be part of it as well. But I love this matchup, and I think Oregon's defense is playing as good a football as it's played all year, Trev. Is it going to be good enough to stop Indiana? Let's find out. Indiana didn't exactly light the world on fire when they beat Oregon last time. They only had 326 yards of offense and 4.8 yards per play. I mean, that wasn't exactly like, oh, wow. How are you going to stop that offense, man?
Right.
I mean, the 326 yards, looking through it, it tied for their lowest output of the season. The only other game where they had that few yards was against Penn State, a game they almost lost. And the next closest game they had to that was the Iowa game, a game they again won by 5. So when Indiana's offense gets shut down, they play far more competitive games. The next lowest yardage total they had was against Ohio State, a game they only scored 13 points. That's
for those reasons,
part of it as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, for those reasons, I'm kind of on the opposite. I agree with everything you're saying about Dan Lanning and that comment in the chat. Can he avoid the unnecessary risks? Will Curt Cignetti be willing to take more? That's another thing that I've kind of noticed about him in some of the bigger matchups. He's like, hey, let's just punt the ball away. We'll rely on the defense. If we got now, again, counter to my counter is in the playoffs. You can win by 3 and it doesn't matter. You still advance to the national championship. But with a team as good as what Oregon is, as talented as Oregon is, and with how good their defense has been playing, there are times where if you're around the 50-yard line, then you should be willing to take a little bit more of a risk. It's one thing that Curt Cignetti, I'd be interested to see what he does this season or in this game. But that's what makes this matchup so interesting is, can Dan Lanning be a little bit more reserved, and will Curt Cignetti be willing to take a few more of the risks? Be very interested to see how that plays out on Friday. But I'm with you, man. This is an extremely interesting matchup, and another one that I had a very hard time predicting, especially because things are so even across the board with these teams.
Yeah. And dude, rematches they're a challenge. I'll say this rematch it was so long ago that I don't think it's going to matter quite as much. Because we've had 3 rematches in the playoffs so far.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2 of them, the team that lost in the regular season won. And the only time that the team that won in the regular season won in the postseason was between Tulane and Ole Miss, correct?
Correct.
Because Alabama beat Oklahoma. That was the rematch. The other rematch was Ole Miss, Georgia. That flipped. And now we've got this one, which I think adds to it. But again, those things don't always. It's not a hard and fast rule. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Well, I'll go ahead and give my prediction for this one. And this one,
I'm not ready yet. I want to talk more, man. I'm ready to talk more about
yeah.
this game. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think this is an intriguing game, Trev. I do. I think one aspect that I'm very curious about too, that we haven't talked a lot about is, again, I do think we're in this territory where we've got 2 teams that are pretty evenly matched. And I think a lot of these things can come down to decisions made by head football coaches. You know, this game is going to be played down in Atlanta. It's not really close to either team. It's a lot further away than Oregon. But I think about last year's semifinal game between Notre Dame and Penn State. And I think about last year's semifinal game between Texas and Ohio State. And in both games, it was late game decision-making by coaches that really proved impactful. Now, there was a lot of things that happened to get you to that point, right? But you think of James Franklin not just taking a knee and going to overtime. And his decision to try to get something going there, Christian Gray picks off Drew Allard, Notre Dame goes down and wins it. You think of Steve Sarkisian late in the 4th quarter against Ohio State. 1st and goal, and he wants to be soft and run outside, do all this kind of stuff, and they just get stuffed. Ohio State, forces a fumble on 3rd down, runs it back for touchdown, ball game, right? There were also times throughout that game where coaches made decisions where you're like, dude, I'm not sure about that one. When you get to these moments, which coach flinches and which one does not? Which one tries to overdo? I'm not going to flinch. Watch, I'm going to go for it on 4th and 5 at my own 25 in the 1st quarter. You know what I mean? Like, I'm glad you got confidence in your offense, but that was dumb. That's something that's very interesting in this game. And that's something that if I'm a fan of either team, I'm more concerned about that if I'm an Oregon fan than I am an Indiana fan. Because if you think about what we talked about, it was 2 coaches that went bold in those moments that lost those games. Had James Franklin gone the conservative route and said, hey, I'm going to trust my team, we're going to go to overtime and win this game. If Sarkisian say, look, man, we're not going to take a chance going outside this, that, and the other thing. We're just going to go right at him, and we got to get a yard. We got 4 downs to get a yard. We're just going to go at him. Maybe the outcome of that game is a little bit different. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you don't go bold. The quarterfinals, Marcus Freeman made some bold choices that got them that win. But what I'm saying is you can go in 2 directions. And sometimes when you try too hard, you put your team in some really bad situations on one side, which is Dan Lanning's mistake. And sometimes you can get so conservative that you can take your team out of some big play opportunities, which you're saying is your concern with Kurt Cignetti. So I think those are going to be very, very interesting aspects to this game.
The biggest thing for me in that conversation you're talking about is it's whatever coach can be the most authentic to himself. Like, because Dan Lanning also can't overcorrect. We talked a lot about Notre Dame this season and how the overcorrection led to a lot of the mistakes that they had. Be who you were that got you to this point. Don't overdo it and don't fully lean into that. But you have to be authentic to yourself. That's what made Notre Dame's run so successful last season. Because all season long, they would go for it on 4th down.
Mm-hmm.
They did that throughout the playoffs. They were gimmicky with special teams. They were that in the playoffs, but they weren't too gimmicky.
Right.
To where for whatever reason, whenever it's not like they would jog out and line up for an extra point, but like they would do the weird motion thing into the PAT formation just to be extra gimmicky because it's the playoffs. Mm-hmm. So to a degree, I agree with you.
Example, stats to back it up, Trev. They went for it on 4th down 8 times against Oregon, against Texas Tech. In the previous 7 games combined, they went for it 5 times on 4th down. You know, like I think they hurt themselves against Penn State a little bit too with some of those decisions on 4th down. You know what I mean? Like,
sure,
you have to be careful. They went for it on, I mean, in the 3 games they've gone for it the most on 4th down, they lost to Indiana. They barely beat a not very good Penn State team, blew a 17-point lead, partly because of some 4th down decisions, and then a playoff game that you won 23-0, but your offense didn't look great. So I think those are all things that you look at and say, that's my thing with Cignetti is those are those are 3 arguably the biggest games they played all year. Because at the time, that Penn State game was a huge game from what the coaches and team perceived going into the game. Now, we come to find out Penn State wasn't as good as people thought, but they didn't know that then. You know what I mean? And those are the 3 games you've gone for it the most. And that's my thing is like, okay, it kind of got you there, but it also gave you your 1 loss. You know what I mean? And I think that's what I'm saying is like, you got bolder in some of the moments, and I think it's cost you. And I go back to Washington when he was at Oregon, when DeBoer was at Washington. He made some really boneheaded 4th down and 2-point conversion decisions in close games against Washington that cost them games. So be bold, but also be willing to say, but this time I'm not going to put my team in that situation.
Sure.
Especially with how good their defense is playing right now. I think that's the other thing too, is this is the best defensive football he's had as a head coach, is what the stretch that they're playing right now is the best his defense has played over a period of time since he's been there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, I'm going to echo what I said. It's as long as you're authentic to who you are. Because I'll also say this, like in bigger games, there's just more opportunities to go for it on 4th down. Like it's not like they're going for it on 4th down 9 times against Tulane because they're probably not facing that many 3rd downs. Sure. Yeah, it's some
they
of
didn't
it's
have a lot of
4th
downs, right?
Exactly. So it's like I get where you're coming from. I'm just as long as you're authentic, because you talked about last year's playoffs. One of the reasons why it didn't work out for Texas is like, unfortunately, that's just who Steve Sarkisian was.
Right.
He was soft. And so it's like that was unfortunately his demise. For James Franklin being aggressive in that side, like that was not who he was. That's one of the reasons why they lost, is because you were doing things out of character. I agree. There's always a line in the sand that you have to draw. It's like, hey, maybe every single 4th down we don't go for it. That I'm totally on board for. It's just I always worry about teams overcorrecting.
I get what you're saying. My point is, though, is part of being a good football coach is knowing when not to do that.
100%.
And that's my thing is like, you go back to the Washington 2023. Part of the problem is who you are is that you're that. And guess what? That's not working for you to win championships. You know what I mean? So you go 0 for 3 against Washington in the regular season. Had you not done that, what does your season look like? That's kind of my thing is you have to be willing to say, hey, look, this is who I am. But as I learn and evolve, I realize I got to be smarter at times.
Sure.
Marcus Freeman is definitely a guy willing to go for it on 4th down, but also understands, like, I'm not going to put my defense in this kind of bad situation. Doesn't mean he's not aggressive with it. That's all I'm saying in this matchup, Trevor. Sometimes, like, who you are has gotten you in trouble. And part of evolving as a coach is understanding I'm not going to put my team in a situation like I did that time and that time and that time and that time and that time. And that's kind of where I'm coming from. So instead of 8 times against Texas Tech, it should have been 5. That's 5 still a lot. You're still who you are. That's what I'm saying. In those big moments, I think he goes too far.
Sure.
In some of those things. And that's the thing. And so it's like they go for it on 4th down and win the game. There's plenty of times it's good to go for it on 4th down. It's just be smart about it. That's the key.
Fair enough. So I have a gut feeling I know where you're leaning on then for your prediction for this game.
Go ahead. You tell me who you got.
Oh, who I have?
Mm-hmm.
I have Oregon winning 31-28.
Okay.
I think in games like this, when it is so evenly matched, because like it's give or take on either side. Oregon has more talent. I use the better coach team. I think when it's that evenly matched, I think you do start to pull a little bit at the rematch factor. I do think that still plays a factor.
Mm-hmm.
I think Oregon has more strings to pull from a motivation perspective in that side. I do. Because it's
who do you think I'm going to pick?
IU.
Why?
I don't think you like
No,
Van Lanning.
Uh-huh.
And I think that you think IU's a better football team, which is fair. Like
Yeah.
but I think you're picking IU. Am I wrong? Ha! Look at this guy.
The reason I'm saying what I'm saying about fourth down is because I do think Oregon I think this is a game that Oregon can win and should win. They're playing, in my opinion, their best defense of the year. I think they match up well against Indiana. I think that the revenge factor is there. I think Indiana can absolutely win this football. These are two, like I said, this is the 1 and 2 team in the country. And I do think right now Indiana is the best team in the country right now. But I think Oregon matches up well against them.
Yeah.
And the Oregon team that they're seeing now is not the Oregon team that we saw in September. It's a better team now. Now, Indiana's gotten better as well, but Indiana has kind of stayed here for the most part because they were already really good. Oregon had to get here. And so I do like Oregon in this game. I think what you're saying is why you thought it was going to go the opposite direction is spot on because those are my concerns about Oregon not winning it. And that's why I don't want him to, because like in a close game like this, where you can say, hey, we actually have the better athletes top to bottom, not by a ton. We have the better athletes.
Sure.
We're coached pretty well also. You know, we have a quarterback that can sling the ball around. I mean, everybody's talking about how Mendoza might be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. Well, who are people saying might be ahead of him? Dante. You know what I mean? Like, hey, they play great in the lines. They're well coached in the lines. So are we. Our offensive skill is healthier. I think that Oregon can win this football game. I think the rematch, all the things you talked about why you're picking in Oregon to win are exactly where I'm at. The reason I'm bringing up the landing stuff is because that could be the thing that flips this.
Sure.
Is him going for, again, I love Marcus Freeman's aggressiveness, but there have been times you're like, even when they're lining up, like if you don't criticize a fourth down decision until after it doesn't work, then I don't want to hear a word from you. So for me, whenever I've criticized a fourth down decision, it's when they line up, I'm like, ooh, I don't like this. And even if it works, I'm like, yeah, that was risky. I wouldn't have done that. And then the next time it doesn't work. So
sure,
there's been times you say, hey, man, I don't know if now's the time. So like against A&M in 23, when Notre Dame went for it on their own, 30-something yard line in the third quarter, and got it. Like, all right, cool. I had no problem with that because your defense was lighting A&M up at that point in time. And then you went for it again near midfield. I had no problem with that. So a lot of people say, well, you got it the first time. Don't take your chances again. No, your midfield, your defense is playing great. If you trusted them to stop them at the 35, you should trust to stop them at the 50. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And that's kind of how I felt about it. And so I just, that's kind of where I'm at is be your aggressive self, but don't overdo it like you tend to do in big games. That's where I'm at. That's not who you are. It's kind of like, Trev, you're going for an interview and you know your stuff, but you try to oversell it and you just kind of come across like, dude, that guy was a little bit much. Like that's what I don't want to see from Lanning. If he can do that, then I feel,
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I mean, honestly, I think we're saying the same thing, just to varying degrees. Because I'm with you. I know you're not talking about too much overcorrection. I'm talking about for Dan Lanning and that team. I just hope that's not his own takeaway. I'm not saying that's what you're saying. I worry about when teams go against what is.
Oh, I agree.
They over.
But I think the overdoing it on fourth down is going against kind of what you are. If you're a team that likes to throw the ball 30 to 35 times a game, but you come out one game and say we're going to do it 50, that's not who you are.
Agreed.
That's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah.
I think both of these games, I think these are going to be two great games. I think they're going to be a lot like last year's. I mean, what did we see in the quarterfinals last year? We saw 2 good games and 2 blowouts, right? Like Notre Dame beat Georgia convincingly, but that was still a good game. I mean, especially the first 28 minutes of the game.
Yeah.
Like Notre Dame had 29 minutes. I mean, Notre Dame had that stretch where you had the strip sack by Junior. The very next play, you have a touchdown pass to Bo Collins. And then the very next play after that, you have a kick return for a touchdown. Game's over. In the other 58 minutes, it was a relatively competitive game. I think Notre Dame was still the better team, but it was a competitive game. Ohio State, Texas turned out to be a 2-touchdown game, but anybody who watched that game knew that was a much more competitive game than the final score showed.
Oh, significantly.
And then the other 2 games, you had Ohio State blew out Oregon, and then you had Penn State blew out Boise State. It was competitive for like a quarter and a half, and then Penn State rolled away. And then and then the two playoff games, the two semifinal games, I thought were great games. I'm sorry, Texas and Arizona State was a close game. And then so you had Texas, Arizona State was a really competitive game. And then Notre Dame and Georgia was a competitive game. And then the other two games were blowouts. Then you get to the semifinals, and they were both very competitive games. And even though Texas lost by 2 touchdowns, anybody watched that game knew until that stop late in the game with like, a minute and a half, 2 minutes left, they fumble, inside the 5. Jack Sawyer runs it back for a touchdown, 14-point game. That was a much closer game than that. I think the same thing is going to be true in this game. I think both semifinal games are going to be very competitive. And it was true the year before that as well. Alabama-Michigan was a very, very competitive game. Washington jumped on Texas, but Texas came back and made that a very competitive football game in the second half. It's probably not since 22 when Georgia smacked, was it Cincinnati? No, it wasn't Cincinnati.
TCU.
No, in the semis. It was Cincinnati, wasn't it? No, Bama beat Cincinnati. Who'd they beat in 2022 in the semis? Why am I drawing a blank here? They beat Michigan in the semis.
Michigan. Or was that 20?
That was 21 that they beat Michigan in the semis. I thought because TCU beat Michigan in the semis in 22. Who did Georgia beat in 22 in the semis? It was Ohio State. So even that was a close game. So
that's right.
I mean, you really got to go back to 21 when Georgia smacked Michigan and Bama smacked Cincinnati. Since we've had semifinal games that weren't competitive.
Yeah.
And I think this is going to be the same.
Agreed. What was your final score prediction again?
27-24.
I have 31-28. So we see it a 3-point margin, just a few more points scored. I do think it's interesting, just not good, not bad, just an observation that you had the Ole Miss Miami game not being being more high scoring than the Indiana Oregon game. Is that just because of the defenses in both
matchups?
Of the? Yeah,
I think in the other game you have one really outstanding offense who doesn't have a great defense against a team that has a really outstanding defense and a not very great offense.
Oh yeah.
So I think there'll be more scoring there. In this game, I think you have two teams that want to run the football and want to play great defense.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think that too.
Style fight, right? I mean,
yeah.
Fight, what is it? Styles make fights, right?
Well, because it goes against what the national narrative push is people just look at Oregon, they look at Indiana. Indiana has the Heisman winner, and then Oregon is just Oregon, and they're always associated with high-powered offense. I think a lot of people just assume that would be the more high-scoring one. Now, that's how I have it played out in mine. I just think that's, again, per the matchups thing, I think that's how it plays out. I just thought that was extremely interesting. Like I said.
Yeah, it's a style fight. I mean, that's really what it boils. Like if Indiana or Oregon were playing Ole Miss, I would predict a much higher scoring game.
Yeah.
If Miami was playing either one of these two teams, I would predict an even lower scoring game than these two teams are playing in.
Yeah. So I think that's why the like Miami Ohio State game over under was like 49.5 or something.
Yeah.
Because they just expected it to be a lower scoring game. I'm with you.
I think you and I both had that well under 49 as well, Ohio State, Miami.
Yeah, I think my
final had like 24-17 or something like that.
Mine was 21. No, I had 24-13.
Okay.
Ohio State.
You were very close in the score.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the wrong Victor.
That's all right. We both had a lot of that in the quarterfinals.
It's been a crazy.
Well, and I just, yeah. The one we were most certain of turned out exactly how we thought it was going to. Even more convincing than
even more so. Like I thought I was going bold 31-17 IU. Yeah. I did not see.
What was my score that game? What was mine? I think I had like 30-17. What did I have?
I think you had 34-17 and I had
34-17. Yeah.
That sounds right.
Yep. And it was 38-3 because Bama stinks.
Well, folks,
Bama stinks. Yeah. So there you go. So we have Miami. I have Miami playing Oregon for the title. You have Miami playing Oregon as well. So we both have the same winners. Okay.
Yep. Yes, we do. That'll be an interesting title game.
Yeah.
More of a defensive battle, too, than what people would think if that's what it comes to be.
Yeah. It won't be a fun. I don't think that'd be a very entertaining game unless you like defense.
If you love defense, you might actually really like that game. But that we could see a national championship with a final score of like 17-13. Yeah, absolutely crazy. Well, folks, that is going to do it for part 2 of the show, where we recapped the college football playoff semifinals and where Trev got a lesson in not assuming things, because sometimes they're not always as they seem.
Well, no, your rationale was smart, though, Trev. I mean, like, because I'm not high on Dan Lanning, and I do think Indiana right now is the best team in the country. I just would argue that you could make a case that Oregon is the most talented team in the country.
Sure.
And that's why I'm like, don't get in your own way. That's really where I'm coming from.
Oh, absolutely. Where I got a lot of it is like, I thought you were kind of setting the stage of like, I know how rematches tend to go, but it's not always that way. And I was like,
Dan Lanning's going to choke. My thing is, don't choke, and you're going to win this football game.
100%. 100%. Well, folks, we're getting ready to wrap up today's show with a mailbag. But before we get there, be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards@irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, to wrap up today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, we have a mailbag to take us home today. And as always, we can't always go forever. But if you want your question or comment answered, you put MB for mailbag or a little mailbox emoji prior to your question. Lets us know to set it aside. If you want your question bumped up to the top, you can always feel free to throw in a super chat, which I do believe we have a couple of those in there, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
From Tyler Evans, appreciate you, man. What do you think of Kenny flipping his commitment from Nebraska to Kentucky, and how will he look in a Will Stein offense?
So I'll say this. It looks bad, the way it went down publicly. I was talking to Sean earlier, and I'll let Sean speak on it, but I think there's more to the story than just Kenny made a decision, somebody threw a bigger bag at him, Kenny took the bigger bag. I think there's more to the story that would make this more understandable, and I'll just leave it at that because that's not my story to tell. But I think it's important to at least note that, because Kenny's taking a bit of a PR beating. Everything associated with Notre Dame right now is taking a PR beating right now because it didn't look good. We were even texting last night, guys, this does not look good. Like, this is a bad look. This looks like he committed, and then 24 hours later, he just gets a bigger offer. Sounds like there's more to it than that. But honestly, I think if you'd have told me beforehand, who should he pick, Nebraska or Kentucky, I'd have said Kentucky. Like, get Kenny Minchie in the Will Stein offense, to your point. Yeah. Because here's what I love about Will Stein's offense. What does he want? He wants a mobile passing quarterback. Like, is that not what he wants? He wants a guy that can sit back in the pocket and deal, but can run read zone, can run draws, can make plays with his legs. That's Kenny.
Yeah.
I mean, I really think in a lot of ways, Kenny is a great fit for Will Stein's offense, and he gets to run it for 2 years. It'll be a little complicated the first year, and I don't know what kind of team he's going to have around him, but hopefully Kenny's making a decision for what the next 2 years are, because I think 2027 for Kenny could be really good.
Yeah.
I mean, he could be really good next year. I'm just saying, like, he hasn't played a whole lot. It's a new system. It's a very different system from what he's run. And I don't know what the team around him is going to be. But I think just taking all that out of the equation, I think stylistically, this is a great fit for Kenny. Because, again, we've said this a million times. Kenny's an athletic kid. He can run. He's not a running quarterback. He is a drop-back quarterback who also happens to be athletic. And I think that's a great for what Will Stein wants. Because I think if Will Stein had his preference, you can have a dual threat guy that's you can have the Dampier kid from from Utah. It wasn't New Mexico. Or you can have a guy that can just sits back in the pocket and throws it. I think he'd take the guy that can sit back in the pocket and throw it. What he prefers is a guy that can sit back in the pocket and throw it who also can move around.
Yeah.
And that's what Dante Moore is. That's what Dylan Gabriel was. And that's what Bo Nix was to varying degrees. And obviously Gabriel and Bo could run better than Dante, but Dante's no stiff in the pocket either. He just likes to sit back and throw it. And Kenny has a lot more in common with Dante than Dylan Gabriel or Bo Nix.
Yeah.
I think it's a great fit. And I think Kenny has a lot more in common with Dylan Gabriel, than he does Dante or Bo Nix, where Bo is much more of a runner and Dante's much more of a passer. I think Dylan Gabriel was kind of that in between. And I think that's where Kenny is. So I think it's a great fit. I love the decision for Kenny. I think optically it doesn't look great how it all went down. But as I said, I was told that there were I don't know the specifics, but from what I've gathered of what I was told, I'd be very curious to find out what happened, because I think in this era we're quick to immediately blame the players. This guy jumped in the portal. Oh, he doesn't want to be in it. Like, well, you don't have a clue what went down. Oh, Jadon Blair jumped in the portal because he doesn't want to compete. I'm like, well, you have no clue what happened, and that has nothing to do with it. Oh, this guy's just jumping in for more money. No, that's not really what this is about either. It's always the player's fault, is the immediate reaction from a lot of fans. I get that. That was our response last night, Trev, you and I. Like, well, man, that's a bad look for Kenny. I'm just saying sometimes there's more to the story, and I think there was with Kenny. But take all that aside, this was a better decision for him. I would not want to play Nebraska right now. Even he's not a great fit for that system, but even then, that place is a bit of a mess right now.
Yeah, I'm going to share my thoughts on the first part of your super chat, Tyler, until more stuff comes out. I'm not going to disagree that it is a bad look. I mean, even if there's more to the story optically, it's still going to remain a bad look. But
because the story's not getting out. That's the problem.
But I'll share my thoughts on the first part. I fall in line with everything Brian said about being in a Will Stein offense. I like that fit better. I mean, honestly, until there's just an entire systemic change with Nebraska, they're just going to be who they are every single year. I think Kentucky has the most opportunity for growth between the two. I mean, I know they were bad this past season, but I like Will Stein. I'm be very interested to see what he builds down in Kentucky. Nebraska is going to go 7-6 next year, lose to every ranked opponent that they play, and then go play in the GoDaddy, Idaho, Potato, Pop-Tart, Cheez-It Bowl. Like, that's just who they are, unfortunately, now. So, yes, I think the fit for Kenny is much better under Will Stein.
Thank you, Chris. Black Irish 864 says, good show. Appreciate that very, very, very much. And then Wade Garrett's got a super chat.
Appreciate you, Wade. Hey, gents, Landau question. I know some people were concerned about the job he was doing due to so many injuries. 2 years in, how do you assess the job he's doing, and what do you base it on? Well, this is interesting because last year we based it on, okay, you have the job. I like that they brought in a guy with NFL experience because they were preparing Notre Dame to go on a much longer than 12-game run. And I thought that towards the back half of the season in the playoffs, that Notre Dame looked like the fresher team. They looked like the fresher team against Georgia. They looked like the fresher team against Penn State. And they were just out-talented to a degree against Ohio State. Ohio State was just a better team that day. Not by much, but they were.
Wasn't an endurance weight room.
No, it wasn't that they were gassed. So in that aspect, it's been great. And then this year, it's an incomplete because we don't know what this team would have looked like in game 13, 14, 15, or 16. The injuries are a concern. There's definitely some trends that I think definitely need to be addressed. I think that there's a much higher volume of injuries in the trenches than I would like. End of the day, injuries are a part of a game. And whenever anybody gets hurt, the first person that gets questioned is, the first person that gets questioned is the strength and conditioning coach. And then the second thing that gets questioned was if it was turf or grass. That's become a very popular thing now too. Injuries are a part of the game. I'd be very curious to see what workout routines look like, what type of practice schedule they're on. That's more so for things like the kicker, like what's going on there. Why have you had significant kicking injuries the last 2 years? But that's kind of what I base it on. But you can't just look at injuries in a vacuum and say it's a strength and conditioning problem. Everything has to be under evaluation, in my opinion, at that point. But yeah, in short, I would say it's kind of incomplete because his first year they played 16 games, and then in his second year they played 12. So that's definitely interesting.
I would add to that conversation, Trevor. We don't know how they would have performed in the playoffs, but the way they were performing in September, they had peaked in September. I mean, their last 4 games was just sheer dominance. Just jumping all over teams. I mean, if even the Pitt game, I mean, let's look at Notre Dame's last 4 games of the year. I would argue even the Pitt game, which was the closest game of them. So from BC on, like after BC, the last 4 games, because BC game, they just played sloppy football. They weren't tired or anything like that. They just played sloppy, not focused football. You played a ranked Navy team, a ranked Pitt team, on the road, Syracuse, and then Stanford on the road. And in all 4 of those games, including the Pitt game, it was over by halftime. I mean, they were all over those teams, just ran them off the field. It was 21-3 at halftime against Pitt. And I think that speaks to it. But at the same time, I have to go back and say, what are you doing that this team didn't look like? Why did your O-line look more fresh in November than they did in September? Why did Anthony Knapp and Emil Wagner, 2 returning starters? Like, here's the deal. You didn't struggle against Miami because your brand new starter, Gerby Lambert, struggled, or because Ashton Craig was rusty after not having played for almost a year, or Billy Schrauth, who missed some games. You looked bad on the offensive line because the 2 guys that started all but 32 potential combined starts in 2024 between the 2 of them, they started 31 of those 32 games. They looked like poo in that game. Why? It could be a Joe Rudolph issue. It could be a Lauren Lando issue. I would argue that the same thing is kind of true in 2024 a little bit. Like, you were ready for that A&M game, but after that, you weren't as locked in. But it's kind of like, is that really a Lauren Lando issue? Because what we saw against Northern Illinois would be a Lauren Lando issue if you did that in week 1. But they did that a week after physically beating up Texas A&M in the 4th quarter of the opener. You know what I'm saying? In hot weather and, Texas humidity and on the road at night and all that other kind of stuff. You didn't look unprepared then. That leads me to believe that it's more of a coaching issue than it is a Lauren Lando issue. I refuse to believe that somehow Lauren Landau's strength conditioning program is why Anthony Knapp and Emil Wagner look like poo in the opener against Miami. I just refuse to believe that.
Agreed.
Because there's no evidence of it. I mean, it just, now to your point though, some of there's been a lot of shoulder injuries, a lot of knee injuries. Those are things that are concerning to me. And I'm very curious to see how this offseason goes. But some of those, it's totally Lauren Landau's fault that Charles Jagasol was writing what I was about to say.
ATV.
I was about to say, it's about to basically the word for UFO.
It's not Lauren Landau's fault that Charles Jagasol was on an unidentified flying object.
Not UFO, but there's the other one.
UAV.
Yeah, I forget what it is. It's like unidentified something. Anyway, but yeah, and then fell and broke his arm. That's not on him. You know what I mean? Like, it's not on him that certain guys get rolled up on from behind. There are some other things that you could be. Is it a shoe issue? Is it a field issue? Like, I don't know. But that's obviously a bit of a concern. There's been some hamstring injuries and some shoulder injuries that are a little concerning. This is a big year that we're really going to know if he's the issue with some of those kind of things. And but as far as like the conditioning part, I mean, he's phenomenal because this team absolutely peaks in November. I mean, if you look at it, Trev, the last 2 years, if you look at November and December, Notre Dame has not played a single game in November, December, the last 2 years that's been a single-digit game. And they beat Florida State by 49, Virginia by 21. It was a 35-0 game. They beat a ranked Army team by 35. They beat USC on the road by 14, and they beat Indiana and by 10 in a game where it was 27-3 when Notre Dame basically called off the dogs. And then this year, obviously, they went out in November, won by 15, 39, 22, 63, and 29. And in 2 of those games, the other team scored last. His team's been just destroyed people, and that includes a playoff game.
Yeah,
in there against the current number 1 team in the country.
Yep.
So from that standpoint, it's hard to argue with what he's doing.
Agreed. Super chat from Benny J. Appreciate you. Will Denbrock give the freshman class tight ends a collective workload compared to Brock Bowers' freshman season?
If they earn it, sure. I mean, he's not going to give it to them. Is he willing to let them play that kind of role if they earn it? Yeah, certainly. Certainly. I just don't know if like the depth chart is set up for that, Trev. I mean, Brock Bowers was a heck of a player, but who else is going to be the starting tight end? John Fitzpatrick, Darnell Washington.
Yeah, I mean,
like one guy's just a guy, and the other guy should have been a tackle.
Yeah, workload is a little bit different than stats, but I would be shocked if
Did I say
either
Denzel?
one of. Yeah, I know
I
what
meant
you meant.
Darnell Washington.
Brian, I think at some point we gotta.
On the background last night when I was working, I had all three of the equalizers playing back to back to back. So I got Denzel on the mind. I love the Equalizer movies. I watch them all the time. But yeah, Darnell Washington should be a tackle.
You're putting together one heck of an all-name team. You got Denzel Washington catching passes from Francisco Mendoza.
Who's in the defensive coordinator for my team is Bryce Baker.
Baker. You got Jontez Walton running the ball.
Yeah, I mean, where'd that come from? I didn't know anybody named Jontez. Oh boy,
yeah, that's good.
I gotta get that checked out, man. Too many concussions in my day.
The all-name
UAP is the thing I was trying to think of earlier. That's
gotcha. But per that super chat, I know stats is different than workload. I would be shocked if one of Ian Premier or Preston Frizzell finished their first year in college with 56 catches, 882 yards, and 13 touchdowns.
Yeah,
that would actually shock me. Like, it's what Brock Bowers did as a freshman.
Yeah. Now, he did that also in 15 games.
Sure.
So, I'll just say this. I wouldn't be shocked by it because I think he's got the talent to do it. I just think it'll be a little harder for him to earn that type of role when you've got James Flanagan, Cooper Flanagan in front of him.
Yeah.
And, because you can't say that they didn't have good receivers on that team because they had Jermaine Burton and Ladd McConkey and A.D. Mitchell, but those guys were – here's the difference, though. Those guys were also all freshmen.
Yeah.
Basically. There was no like Ladd McConkey was there, but he was his first year really playing. You know what I mean? Like he was a freshman. He wasn't senior Jordan Faison. You know, A.D. Mitchell was a really good player, but he was a freshman. He wasn't senior year version of Jaden Greathouse, which also goes back to my point. I don't care about youth at skill positions. Because if the portal was the way it is now, Georgia would have gone out and got a veteran tight end and veteran receivers and not developed those young players. They might have still won a championship. But my thing is, if you got talent at the skill positions, coach them up. Line play is a little bit different, like I've said, but coach him up. But I think he's capable of it. I just think the depth chart and around him is built differently. Is he putting up those kind of numbers if A.D. Mitchell and Ladd McConkey are in their senior versions of themselves? Probably not. They were just as young as he was, is my point. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. Capable of it, but I don't think that he will. All right, let's go. I think we had one more.
From Raymond Hartman, appreciate you, man. I appreciate you guys still covering these playoff games. Getting Partridge was a big time hire. Time to develop this great Notre Dame talent.
Yeah, look, this is kind of one of my pushbacks to people that are like, nothing has gone well since the end of the season. I'm like, they had the number one recruiting class in the country they signed since the end of the season, and they also made a great hire at defensive line coach. Like, you're choosing to obsess on the things that aren't going well. And we're not denying that there aren't things that aren't going great. My point is, but when you obsess on it so much that you can just basically kind of dismiss a number one ranked recruiting class and a hire like that, then Notre Dame's not the problem. You need to take a deep breath and start to say, man, am I obsessing too much on negative things in my life? And maybe look in the mirror a little bit on that one. And I don't say that as an insult. I have to do that sometimes. I mean, Trev, we'll sit here and talk about, then spend 20 minutes talking about something negative. I'm like, man, there's a lot going on in our world. You know what I mean? I'll have an argument with my wife and I'm like, dude, there's so many good things in our marriage and our life. Why are we arguing about this? This is like not even something that should even matter. And that's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to talk down on anybody because we do that. We're all guilty of that. And just a reminder that there are some things going well, and we can talk about those even while we also talk about the things that we're also not saying, hey, be blind homers and don't talk about the things that aren't going great. Just do both. Do both.
Agreed.
Thanks for the super chat from Rocks in the Box 21. Can we hear both of your QB cadences? No, you're not going to hear our QB cadences because I am not shouting into a camera with my throat the way it is. Nor is anyone to hear that. But I'll just tell you this. I'll make it easy for you. Go listen to John Elway. I literally mimicked my cadence after John Elway. I was very good at drawing people off sides. Very good. Because I was a big John Elway fan. But I had that really good hut, but I didn't do like such a big thing that you over-exaggerate it, but I had a very loud voice. I was very good at drawing people off sides. If my dad's in the chat sometimes, probably not today, he's probably working, but he'll tell you. I had a very loud cadence. And I was loud enough where you could hear me no matter where we were. I sounded just like John Elway. How his cadence, because that's who I learned from for my entire life. I mean, since I was 5, I was listening to John Elway, and he had probably the best hard count I've ever seen in my life. That was Trevor's cadence. Yeah, you're Jackson Dart. Yeah, yeah, exactly. For those listening via podcast platform, Trevor's literally just doing the clap.
Yeah. Brian's a little sick. I'm not going to clap into the microphone, but whenever I was in the shotgun, I would like my cadence under center was very like color number,
Yeah.
Set go.
Well, we still, when I was in college and high school, because I mean, again, I'm a lot older than you. I think you were born in 97, right? That was my senior year of high school. So even in high school, we did a lot of shotgun. In college, we did a decent amount of shotgun. I still had to give my cadence in the shotgun. This was before the clap really was a thing. So, yeah, I had to be loud to make sure that the center could hear me. But believe me, that was never an issue. It's never an issue.
Love it.
Yeah. So, good question. But I'm going to save everyone that. Have to deal with that stuff.
From Adam Garcia, after reading Drake Bowen's post of it being the last dance and Freeman saying run it back for 26, do you guys get the sense that the players think this is the final year under Freeman?
Look, I don't want to speak on what the players think. Drake Bowen's comment was literally because he only has 1 year left. I mean, that's all Drake has is 2026. He can't come back in 27 even if he wanted to, barring something happening that we don't even want to put out there. Because he played, I think, in every game as a true freshman on special teams and then has been a starter the last 2 years. So Drake's post makes complete sense for Drake. Drake doesn't need to care about whether Freeman's coming back in 27 or not because that won't have any impact on him. He's done after this year no matter what. So I don't think the two things had anything. Now, Adam, I can understand why you put them together. Totally get it. But I think that has more to do with frustration that I and a lot of other people that I know have with Marcus Freeman's tweet. Like, I'm sorry, you're the head coach at Notre Dame. You may not feel that you owe your fan base anything, but you do owe your fan base a little bit more than a let's run it back when we've had to sit there for a month listening to all the rumors about this NFL job you're looking at and this college job that is looking at you. I don't think you had any interest in other college jobs at all. But I do think you owe a statement about how, hey, look, we're excited about, what the future holds. Because the future is till the 26th season. That is still part of the future. You don't have to commit to being here the next 10 years. But give me a little bit more than the run it back 2026. Because when we've had to listen to a month of, is he going to go to the NFL or not? And then all you say is, let's run it back. You're telling the fan base, whether you think so or not, one more chance and I'm out. Like, they're going to think that. There's a lot of people are going to think that. And I understand why. And I'm not saying that Freeman has to commit to anything beyond 2026. But I think you can at least commit to, give people more about like, listen, I am excited about this team. We have a chance to do something great. My focus is entirely on this football team. And I appreciate the interest from other people. That says a lot about, if the team glory, you get individual glory, blah, 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 blah. But you could have given us something more than that. But again, I just don't think that they think about what's best for the fans. They're an afterthought, in my opinion, for too much of Notre Dame's football program. And they're going to get mad at me for saying that, but that's what your actions show.
Yeah. Adam, I get where you're coming from this, but I think it's also a testament to the mindset being where your feet are. And right now what they're doing is they're gearing up for 2026. Because look, let's play this out. even if, like, let's just say Marcus Freeman publicly announced that he signed a lifetime contract extension with Notre Dame, the focus is still going to be on 2026.
Right.
And I think that's where a lot of that mindset comes from. I understand why you drew that analogy, but I'm with you in how it was announced that Freeman was coming back. I don't like that the head coach of a major program is announcing his return to the team like a fourth-year senior, or, you know, like a guy going
like
into
a high
his fourth
school,
year.
right? Exactly.
Yeah,
or a high school kid, you know, or
yeah, I don't love that, but yeah.
Because again, if there was no rumblings of, if Marcus Freeman had already said like, hey, listen, you know, I'm not going anywhere, I'm coming back, blah 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 blah. Okay, cool, man. Like, that's great. Run it back 2026. You know, now the official end of the 25 season, whatever, we're running it back in 26. Cool. But when the context of there's been this rumor and this rumor and this rumor about you being linked to NFL jobs, of people saying it confidently that you're being linked to NFL jobs, I just think you owe it to a fan base that has been extremely loyal to you since you got here. That wanted you to be the head coach, that's cheered for you, that's just been absolutely just love Marcus Freeman. I think you owed them a little bit more than just run it back 2026. I'm sorry. You just did. You know, take 20 minutes to put a press release together. But again, I don't think they look at it that way. I just don't. So, yeah.
From Bobby S., is Notre Dame going after one or two wide receivers in the portal? And is Harris from Boston College and Isaiah Canyon from Georgia Tech involved? Canyon is a freak show. Also, how do the coaches behind the scenes view Cam and Burris?
So at least one is the goal. I do believe that Reed Harris and Isaiah Canyon are involved. To what degree? I don't know. I don't know that either one is committed to even a visit yet. So I'm not sure on that. We'll have to find out more on that one, but they're both very talented. I did full film breakdowns. I broke down 7 games of each player. There's some clips on there, my analysis of what they are as players, how they fit in the Notre Dame offense. I did that for the premium message board, so you can check that out. Trev, I know you've texted me the other day that you like those features. I appreciated that. How do the coaches behind the scenes view Cam and Burris? Well, Cam is basically, this is how the Notre Dame coaches view him. Freak athletically, but does he want to be great? Now, I think that there's a level of, your job is to push him as hard as you possibly push him and work with him as hard as you can work with him to get the most out of him. That's your duty. Shouldn't always be on the player when a kid has that kind of talent. Like, look, Trev, let's be honest. As a coach, there are times where a player who doesn't want it, you're not, whatever, that's on you. Because like, you're not good enough for me to invest all that time to get a solid player out of you. If you don't want to work, then I got 5 other guys like you on my roster. You don't have anybody else on your roster like Cam Williams. So even if Cam doesn't have the greatest focus or work ethic or whatever, then it's your job to do everything you can to get him to that point, because he's too talented. But at the same time, Cam has to take some of that on too. How great do you want to be? How hard do you really want to work at this thing? Like, I'll tell you right now, like if Cam Williams, like, let's just say I was doing like receiver coaching and stuff like that. Like, I'm like, dude, if you let me work with that kid in the offseason and he's willing to put in the work and take the time and do all that, this kid could be a star. I really, truly believe that. But will Cam put in that work? Will he seek out that kind of extra assistance and help? I don't know the answer to that question. But I mean, you could even see it in the game where he got the PI against him. It's a terrible route. He just is so fast he could run by the guy. You know, like, dude, you're a sophomore now. Like, I should expect you to know how to run a post route a little bit better than that. But at the same time, I'm like, but dude, he ran right by the guy. Sometimes you don't have to be a great route runner. It's like, dude, just run real fast. Beat that guy. I don't need you to know 87 routes. And that's where my frustration is. There needs to be a happy medium between he has to know the whole playbook and be the precise route runner, and, you know, he knows nothing. You guys got to work to find that middle ground. And so it's up to Cam and the coaching staff to make him a priority, because you just can't let a kid with his talent fall by the wayside because he doesn't know the playbook or isn't a great route runner and things like that. You know, I was told by somebody in the program that, you know, when he first got there, he didn't know anything. And I'm like, then freaking spend extra time with him and work with him and coach him up and teach him and get him to that point. Because you're not, with all due respect to Isaiah Canyon and Reed Harris, even if they come to Notre Dame, Cam is still the most physically gifted receiver on the roster. There's not a portal receiver in the country outside of maybe Cam Coleman that I would look at and say is going to come to Notre Dame and be the most physically gifted player on the roster, because it'll always be Cam Williams outside of maybe Cam Coleman. But Cam's got to say here's my challenge to Cam. I don't care what the coaches are or are not doing. How great do you want to be? And if you don't want to be great, then okay, I understand. I won't waste time on you. You're a great teammate. You're good in the locker room. Cam's not a locker room issue at all. He's a great kid. He does the mic stuff, so you know he loves Notre Dame. But it's like, if you don't want to be great, then I understand. No big deal. Not everybody wants to be great. But if you want this, then you've got to show me that you want this, and you got to put in the work. Then I'm going to jump in and be all over you. I hope that's the mindset both sides take. Like, that's what it'd be. Is like, I'd sit down if I was him, and I would sit there and say, I would talk to him and I'd say, listen, Cam, I think you got a chance to be a special player. But all great players don't just get by on having great talent. They all work. They all are masters of their craft. If you want to be a great player here, I need you to take pride in your craft. I need you to put in the work. I need you to get on the jugs for extra 100 things after practice. Not because I'm telling you to, because you show. And I need you to show me that you want to be great. I'm not going to call you and ask you to do extra time. You got to come in and see me. You know, and then make Cam take that first step. But if Cam takes that first step, then I'm all over him. I'm like, man, we're going to turn this kid into a star. It's got to be both of them. It's not just blame the coaching staff and just blame Cam. It's both of them. Elijah Burris, the staff is also very high on. They love Elijah. I had a coach tell me last summer, like, nobody can guard him on defense when he knows the route. Like, he is a pain in the butt. Now, I don't think he ever went against Leonard. He doesn't very often go against Leonard Moore because Leonard's in the boundary and east of the field. But like, it doesn't matter if it was Christian Gray, Mark Zachary, Dallas Golden. It didn't matter. Devontae Smith. It didn't matter. They can't cover Elijah because he's got great feet. He's a great route runner. He's got very, very good hands when he knows what he's doing. The problem for Elijah is he didn't always know what he's doing because it is a complex playbook. He's another guy that I think you make a special project this offseason. And that's not a negative. There's a lot of kids who come in and aren't ready to play as freshmen. And you didn't need to push the issue because you had Jordan Faison and Jaden Greathouse and Malachi Fields and Will Pauling and Cam Williams and Logan Saldate and KK Smith. You didn't need to push the issue now. Now you do need to push the issue a little bit. So I do know that they're higher on those. They're high on those guys.
Good deal. From Tommy Tough Nuts, how much?
I'm sorry. This is Tommy Guns. So first of all, taking my insult of Lincoln Riley, but do you see what his shirt says?
Yeah, I do. That is
a picture of Lincoln Riley that says Marcus Freeman is my daddy. I'm sorry, we had to point that out. That is freaking hilarious. That is absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Oh, that's great. Well, from Tommy Guns, aka Tommy Tough Nuts, how much are we not in love with Notre Dame's portal process so far? Not asking about actual or potential results, just the way the process has gone thus far.
But so here's my overall thoughts on this. I've said this on the board. Are there some things that I have some red flags that I'm concerned about? Yes, there are. And I put those thoughts on the board. But I'm also like, guys, there's a lot we don't know. And there's a lot of faulty reporting on this. So like last night, it was reported that Mateen Ibaragba is not going to visit. And everybody lost their minds. Today, it's being reported by John Bryce and I'm not sure the other guy wasn't us, that he is visiting. And now, people are losing, going to be happy, but, got to be Texas. Like, but was he ever not going to visit? Was he ever going to visit? Like, there's all this guy, oh, you lost on this guy. Did they? Yeah, they wanted him to visit, but there's a lot of kids they get to visit that they don't take. That's kind of my issue. It's like, there's a lot of stuff out there that I think has been either wrong or exaggerated. This is the number one guy. I can tell you that before Nick Marsh committed to Indiana, I had been told that not everybody and not even most people viewed him as the number one target on the board. There's some people that like other guys better, but the perception was that Nick Marsh was the guy. Now, Nick Marsh was the one guy that we knew was going to be a target for a while, and Notre Dame did like Nick Marsh. I'm not pretending that they didn't. They would have absolutely taken him. but it was portrayed as like it's him, and if they don't get him, I don't know what they're going to do. And so I think there's a lot of things in the way that it's being reported that is making people overreact to what's happening. And I think some of the losses that people didn't anticipate, like if Josh Burnham didn't transfer, I think the overall perception of what's going on right now would be different. You know, like if Armel Mukum didn't jump in a portal, things would be viewed a little bit differently. I think the other thing too is a lot of you are watching Indiana get a bunch of portal guys, and this team's. And my response to that is Indiana has to do that
100%. Like
because they're going to lose a ton of guys from their roster. Texas Tech is going to lose a ton of guys from their roster. Notre Dame, as we said in the opener, they need a receiver, a D tackle or two, and a kicker. That's really all they need. I'd like another nickel for depth. They don't need one. I'd like a defensive end now that Burnham's gone. But, I mean, you got Bryce Young and Boubacar. I mean, bring in a vet. I'd say, hey, man, let's get Preston Zinner going. So the point is it good so far? No, they haven't got anybody yet. Do I have some concerns about the process? Yes. Am I flipping out yet? No, because I want to see how the next 10 days are going to go. And that's where I think people need to calm the heck down. Let's see how it plays out. Now, they could finish with a strong class, and you and I look back and say, yeah, but the process sucked. And you can't bank on that. Like somebody said, well, if they end up with a great class, that doesn't really matter how it plays out. That's not true. You could win a game turning it over 4 times, but I wouldn't then go into the office and say, hey, maybe that's the reason we won. Let's try turning it over 4 times next week as well because it worked for us in this win. No, you won in spite of the 4 turnovers. So do I think there's a learning process involved? Yeah, but I'm sorry, you're GM, you're a head football coach. We don't have time for mulligans. But do we know that it's a mulligan yet? We don't. That's my whole point. Relax, let the process play out, then we can evaluate how things go because as I said before, as I said in my post last night, there are guys that Notre Dame is after that nobody knows about because they haven't been linked with Notre Dame yet, but that doesn't mean Notre Dame isn't on them. There are some guys that aren't in the portal yet that I think are going to jump in the portal that I think Notre Dame will be all over. So we just have to let the process play out. And that's why I said at the beginning, I could come on here and rage today, and I would have promised you we'd probably got to, if I'd have said, Trev, we're going to talk about the portal today. And the Tyler show is going to be Notre Dame struggling to land in the portal. I promise you we'd have been over 1,000 people in the show the entire time. And I knew that. But I'm not playing on the rage because that's not where I am. Where I am is there's some things I like about it, some things I don't like about it. Let's see how the next 10 days go, and then we'll have a better sense. And the sense may be this was a disaster, and Mike Martin completely dropped the ball his first portal cycle. Or it could be, you know what? Maybe they had a plan, and this is where it is. So that's what I'm saying is it may not be a good process, but we don't know that yet. How many pickups has Ohio State gotten out of the portal so far? I think 1. How many guys has Georgia landed in the portal so far? I think 1, 2, maybe. Like, how many has Oregon got out of the portal so far?
100%. Like, look, if your feelings towards what Notre Dame is doing in the portal, if the foundation of your argument is what other teams are doing in the transfer portal, then it's just misguided. Plain and simple. I don't listen to anybody who's like, well, look what Indiana got in the portal. It's like, yeah, that's because Indiana doesn't have the players waiting in the wings like what Notre Dame does. Like, they had to go out and get Josh Hoover. Would you like CJ Carr to jump into the transfer portal so Notre Dame could have gotten Josh Hoover? Like, what's this conversation that we're having right now? That's my thing. It's like Indiana is in a spot where they have to do that. This also frustrates me from a talent perspective. We spend every season, every offseason, every preseason, and then every year during the season trying to convince people that Notre Dame has top-level talent. And half the time we have to convince Notre Dame fans of that. But we have to sit here until we're blue in the face, talk about Notre Dame is a talented team. They're a talented team. Don't know how well. I love Josh Burnham, and I wish he would have stayed. But the fact that he transfers to Indiana and then people start talking about him like he's prime Khalil Mack, what are we doing here?
He will be the guy at Indiana next year.
Yeah.
He won't be the guy at Notre Dame next year.
Flat out.
Look, I don't like that he left. I'm not happy he left.
Same.
And I don't like how the process went, but the point is you still have Bryce Young and Boubacar Traore. It's not like he left and now you're like, well, who the freaking heck is going to play there?
Right.
You know, like that's my thing. Now, can they get shut out at D tackle and we're excited about the team next year? No, they can't. But why are you assuming they're going to get shut out at D tackle in the portal? Like, let the process play. The kid from Pitt just jumped into the portal today. Remember how much we talked about him going into that game? This kid's a pretty good football player. I'm not saying Notre Dame's going to get that kid, but I'm saying is he's not the last guy that's going to jump in the portal. Just a reminder, you have 14 days to jump into the portal. You don't have to jump in and then commit somewhere right away. And the top players can be more patient than other guys. So that's what I'm saying is like it may end up being a dud. It may end up being that. I don't know that. You don't know that. Neither does anybody in the chat. Neither is anybody losing their mind writing articles and how Notre Dame sucks and all this other kind of stuff. You don't know that yet. Let's let it play out. Then we can evaluate it. As I said earlier, it's like when people flip out after the score of a first quarter game. Do you remember what the chat was like in the Stanford game? I pointed this out earlier. Remember what the chat was like in the first quarter of the Stanford game in 2024? I mean, you'd have thought that Marcus Freeman was ready to get run out of town, and according to people losing their minds. And at the end of the game, it was 49-7, and it wasn't close. It's a 4-quarter football game. This is a 14-day process. We're in day 4. It may end up being something that we heavily criticize Notre Dame for. May not be. Let's at least let the process get halfway there.
Yeah.
Before we start writing the obituary for Mike Martin in the Notre Dame football operation. That also doesn't mean that there aren't some concerns that we have. We do have some concerns, but it's just enough to say, look, I know how this goes. You know, like I'm sitting here when I'm coaching and as a recruiter, I can promise you there were kids that for 3/4 to 4, to 90% of the time that I was recruiting that kid, we were coming from behind. All that matters, I got him at the end. And I remember recruiting a stud running back from Virginia, and it's from Virginia. He was from the same high school that Armo Mukum and CJ Prosise went to. Man, I thought I had him, dude, and he was so good. He had been great in our system. Big old kid, 6 foot, 200 pounds, big old running back. And at the last day, the very last at the end of the process, he calls me crying, Coach, I'm going to Johns Hopkins. I just can't turn down Johns Hopkins. I'm so sorry, Coach. I'm so sorry to let you down. I said, bro, you're going to Johns Hopkins. You don't got to say jack to me about an apology. I get it.
Yeah.
But like we led the whole time. End of the day, I didn't get him. There's other guys. I got a kid from New Jersey that same year in that same recruiting class. I was behind the whole time. The end of the deal, got it done. All that matters is where the finish is. Remember when, and I'll use an example. You guys remember last February when a lot of people in this chat were losing their minds about the recruiting? Chad Bowden's gone, and he was this great recruiter, and he was. This isn't a shot at Chad. This is a shot at the reaction to Chad leaving. They haven't even had kids on campus yet. They haven't landed anybody since such and such player committed during the season, and we're all freaking out. And I said, guys, this may be a problem, but can we just at least wait till like May to freak out? And let's just see how this goes.
Yeah.
And then what was the end result? Number 1 class in the country. Right? This may not turn out that way. It may not turn out like that. It may turn out bad. But you got what we were all flipping out back in February of last year. And all we said was, guys, we're not saying it's great. Just wait. We just said, let the process flip and play out a little bit first. And then we can evaluate the end result. And by June, we're thinking this is the best recruiting class Notre Dame has signed since however. Right? Isn't that how it went? Mm-hmm. That's all I'm seeing, folks. Just give me 10 days before we flip out, lose our minds, write all these articles about how stupid Notre Dame is, how bad they suck. Those articles may be justified, but they're not on day 4. They're more on day 14, 15, and beyond.
I was just about to say, and you can even argue that they might not even be warranted on day 14. To your point, like that's just when players have the opportunity to jump in. That doesn't mean they have to be signed somewhere.
Let's just say that by then, a lot of the kids have decided. Most of these kids are going to have to decide soon because they've got to enroll in spring semesters and all that. To your point, like most of it will be decided by then, but not all. To your point, not all. But like at least wait till the process to jump in is over. Because like yesterday, thinking, if they don't get this guy from Wake Forest, who are they going to get? Well, Xavier Gilliam's on campus right now. And, oh, by the way, earlier this morning, after everybody freaked out, a pretty darn good defensive tackle that we talked about in our preparation for the Pitt game jumped in the portal. I don't know if Notre Dame's going to go after him, but I'm simply making the point that, like, maybe we should just kind of relax a little bit and let the process play out. Then we can evaluate properly what happened in his recruitment, That's all I'm asking for. And I don't think that's asking for too much.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, and what year he was, Francis Brewu was part of the 24 recruiting class. So I believe that he would have recruited Francis Brewu to Pitt. I'm just saying. That doesn't mean he's going after him, but my point is, yesterday he wasn't even on the radar. Today he is. So just give me 10 days before we continue our freakouts. Let's just let the next 10 days go by. Then we can have an honest assessment of what this portal situation looks like. And let's not forget that they still have CJ Carr coming back. They have not lost a single running back in the portal. They haven't lost a single wide receiver that we didn't think was going to go in the portal. They haven't lost a single offensive lineman to the portal. They had a couple guys go pro, one of which we are happy about going pro because he was blocking better players. The other one I'm not thrilled about. That happens. You know, Bubakar's coming back. Bryce is coming back. Drake's coming back. Leonard Moore's coming back. Christian Gray, Don Schuler, Tay Johnson. They're all coming back. So let's let that process play out. Notre Dame doesn't need a portal class like Indiana. Can Indiana give more money to Nick Marsh than Notre Dame should? Notre Dame should not have. If Nick Marsh's salary is what I was told it was, I don't want Notre Dame to give him that kind of money. Indiana has to. Why? Because they're losing Elijah Surratt. They're going to lose E.J. Williams, and they're probably going to lose Omar Cooper. They don't need to give that kind of money, and they don't have a Cam Williams, a Micah Gilbert, guys like that ready to go. They got Charlie Becker, might be the only proven guy that they have coming back. You know, so they need to go to the money to get a quarterback. Why? Because they don't have CJ Carr coming back next year, who, by the way, when you compare him to Texas Tech, put up very similar numbers to what Brendan Sorsby put up as a passer. And in my opinion, I mean, you look at, okay, so let's go to quarterback rating this year. Indiana just got Josh Hoover. Who averaged more yards passing per game, Josh Hoover or CJ Carr? Josh Hoover did, right? CJ Carr this year averaged 24 passes a game. Josh Hoover averaged 24. CJ Carr completed passes at a higher rate, 66.6 compared to 65.9. CJ averaged 9.4 yards per attempt. Josh Hoover averaged 8.4 yards per attempt. Josh Hoover had over twice as many touchdowns. Josh Hoover had a passer rating of 153.35. CJ Carr had a passer rating of 168.06 in his first year as a starter. Y'all know I'm a big fan of Josh Hoover. But who would you rather have, CJ Carr or Josh Hoover? And guess who's going to cost more money? Josh Hoover. So again, just let the process play out. And then we can evaluate it. Because Notre Dame still has a pretty good situation. There's a very toxic environment going on in the Notre Dame fan base right now. And I understand it. It's been a rough month. But we have to, in my opinion, all of us, because I've been part of this as well, we have to be willing to say, hey, maybe it's not as bad as we think. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't that long ago we were like, wait till next year. And now because you lost Josh Burnham and Armo Mukum, I'm supposed to be like, this team's going to suck next year? Well, we thought they were going to get portal D tackles. They still might. We don't know. There's literally one on campus right now. And according to John Bryce, another one that everybody loves is going to be on campus today or tomorrow. Let it play out.
Yeah, 100%. From Aiden Benami, thoughts on Kenny flipping to Kentucky and then Kentucky throwing a bag of blank check at him. Hard to believe or hard to blame him when you have no allegiance, but hopefully he didn't give Coach Rule his word prior.
So I'm bringing this up because I want to reiterate again. I think a general rule also that we all need to take into account, and this is, again, for me, because, I mean, we were talking about this. Not every situation is about a player just taking a bag. And until we know what the reason was, I think we should maybe especially someone like Kenny who has proven his, himself as a person. And I kind of feel bad on I'm talking to myself because I had this reaction last night. This is a bad look for Kenny, man. Kenny's better than this. Now, I didn't say that publicly, but we were I'll be honest, we were having that conversation. I said that to you guys. And then you find out today, like, yeah, there's a little bit more to it than what we're saying. So from what I'm told, again, I think there's more to it than just Kenny getting a blank check at him. I don't know that's I'm sure that's what Nebraska's spinning it as, but I was told there's more to it than that. And I think we should just kind of sometimes remember that. And sometimes it may be just the player just is lies. Players aren't infallible either. You know what I'm saying? But it's like this. It's always the player's fault for some people, or it's always the coach's fault for other people. Sometimes it's neither. Sometimes it's both. Sometimes it is one or the other.
From Rocks in the Box, thoughts on Jordan Faison not playing lacrosse this next spring? Would his decision to focus on football encourage other players to put more effort into this offseason? I mean, potentially. I guess I'll attack the first one. I mean, we talked about it, I think, last week in the mailbag. I like the decision because I think his future is brighter with football. He's a heck of a lacrosse player. When I mean his future, it's where are you going to make more money as a professional lacrosse player or an NFL football player? And the answer to that is pretty simple. Will his decision encourage more people to focus on football? I mean, potentially, because I don't really know how many dual sport athletes they have on their current roster. I mean, ideally, the way that this team is constructed and the mindset that they are allegedly having going into this season, and the only reason why I say is allegedly is because I just don't know. I'm not on the team. I don't play. But I'm hoping that people weren't going to not be bought into this offseason and then like, wait, Faison's not playing lacrosse? All right, we're all in. I really hope that that's not the mindset of this team. I was hoping that they were just going to do that anyways. That's kind of how I
agree with that, Trev, but I think there's a level of accountability that comes with that. It's why leaders are leaders, right? You need leaders because not everybody's a self-starter. Not everybody views it the same way. When you're like, hey, I'm going to put in the work today, and there's levels. And one of the things you learn as a coach, you don't really think about it as a player, but you learn as a coach is not everybody has the same evaluation of what hard work is. You know what I mean? Like, my view of me cleaning my room was not the same as my mom's idea of what my clean room should look like. You know what I'm saying? Like, I cleaned my room. What are you talking about? I did what you told me to do. Yeah, this is not clean. Well, it is to me. When a kid like him, and you know who told me a great story is Alex Bars told me a great story one time about Quentin Nelson. Quentin wasn't a talker. I mean, he wasn't a get in front of the team. And that was McGlinchey's role. McGlinchey was like the spokesman and Q was like the doer. But he said, we didn't need Q to go off on us. And he would from time to time. He said, but we were like, look, this dude works. This dude's the baddest dude on our team, but he works like crazy. And he practices hard every Tuesday, every Wednesday, every Thursday. He raised the bar that we all then had to live up to. He set the standard that we all then had to go match. That's what made Quentin Nelson a great leader. And if you didn't match it, he'd let you know about it. He's like, if I'm doing this, why aren't you doing this? Because I'm an All-American. Because remember, he was an All-American in 2016. We just forget about him and McGlinchey being All-Americans because the team sucked, but they were All-Americans. By Jordan Faison doing this, he's like, hey, boys, look what I'm sacrificing. Just like Drake Bowen, when he gave up baseball, I think that elevated him in the eyes of his peers. He's given up something he loves to be with us. And for Jordan, it's even more so because Drake wasn't really like a dude on the baseball team. Jordan is a dude on the lacrosse team. And he's given up a chance to go play lacrosse with his brother because Dylan is going to be a freshman on the team this year. If he's given that up, I got to step up and make sure that I'm matching what he brings to the table. And so, no, some guy who was just going to be sitting in his room eating Doritos on a Tuesday is not going to still be – it's not that. That guy's going to still be lazy. That's not changing because Jordan Faison gave up lacrosse. But does he set a new bar that raises the commitment level to an even greater level? Yeah, I think that's where he can have that kind of impact. But it doesn't take guys who didn't care, doesn't make them care all of a sudden, to your point, Trev. It doesn't mean a team that wasn't hungry as a team becomes hungry. It's just another thing of another leader saying, look what I'm giving up. You know what I mean? Like, look, I sacrificed. I went through this. I went through that. I did this. I did that. You don't see me jumping in the portal. Yeah, I was pissed about it, thought about transferring during the season, but I'm here now. Let's put in the work.
Yeah.
And that's where I think you need for this team to stay as hungry as they're going to be.
Oh, absolutely. And the other piece of it too, which makes this a very fascinating conversation, is the other ownership piece is also on Jordan Faison. Now that you are here and you can give 100% of your focus to football, then your level of play also then has to be raised. Because it won't be just good enough to say, hey, guys, like I stopped playing lacrosse for this. It's like, but you're still practicing at the same level that you were when you were playing lacrosse. So that's what makes this such an interesting dynamic. I agree with what you're saying for sure. Be very interested to see what type of effect it does have. And I think it's going to be a net positive. I mean, that was a huge decision for him. So overall, I think it'll be a net positive, but there's still some things to go for Jordan Faison to get up to that Quentin Nelson-esque level of like, okay, I am now setting the standard. It's like, okay, freeing you up from playing lacrosse in the spring now gives you the ability to help set that standard. Correct. But there's also another guy in that room.
Yeah. But
there's number one that's been setting that standard for the last 2 seasons.
But there's a buy-in now. You're going to see Jordan Faison in the weight room. You're going to see him getting the extra catches. You're going to see that. And you're going to be like, okay, look, we know what he gave up. What are you willing to give up? What are you willing to give up today? You know what I mean? And that's not something that Jordan Faison says. That's something that Mike Denbrock says. This kid gave up a chance to be an All-American lacrosse player, a national champion lacrosse player, and part of a team with his brother. Because he wants to be here with you, because he has something special. And that's the first thing that I was told when I reached out to a family member of his. First thing he told me was these kids are bought in for 2026. Like, he wants this. But also he felt that he putting in this kind of work would allow him to focus more on becoming the best player he can be for the NFL. I'd be lying to you if I said that wasn't part of it. And that should be part of it. There's nothing wrong with that. But the biggest thing was he knows what this team is capable of, and he wants to make sure he's doing everything on his part to make sure he can be the best player he can be to help the team achieve that goal. And I'm a big fan of that. Big fan of that. Now it's about him becoming a more consistent player. And I think it'll help him also be a little bit fresher.
Yeah.
That's a big thing for me. Because playing lacrosse at the college level is not an easy task.
No,
it's not on your body, especially for a 5'10", 190-pound guy. That's a demanding sport, bro. Like, I'll be honest. When I first first time I heard lacrosse was in high school, and I only heard of it because I'd read about it in the sports page, and it was the only people playing lacrosse were like Norfolk Academy, Tidewater Academy, like all these private schools with kids that I would have never hung out with. Like, did you seriously tuck in your polo and not even pull it out? Like, bro, you're a dork. Like, that's what I perceived lacrosse to be. And then I saw it played in college, and I'm like, yo, these cats are kind of physical. Then I saw it played at the Division I level. When I started covering Notre Dame, I was like, this is a different sport than I thought it was. You know what I mean? Like, these cats are big. I mean, some of those guys on I don't know what they're called, the back line. I don't know what they're called. There's like 6'4", 230-pound dudes back there.
Yeah, defenders, dude, they're nasty.
Yeah, I'm like, dude, that guy could be playing like Mike at Notre Dame. You know what I mean? So, like, and then you see Jordan Faison, and he looks small on the lacrosse field as well. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, it's a demanding sport, and they're just nonstop running. Now his body gets to be more focused on the football-specific athletic traits. So, yeah. Want to bring this up real quick, Trev. And by the way, wanted to pull this up here, Trev. When you look at the FanDuel odds to win a championship, you and I said earlier that we thought the Indiana-Oregon game was like that was the two best teams. It appears that FanDuel feels the same way, because basically whoever wins that game is going to have the best odds to win the championships. You have Indiana plus 130, Oregon plus 310, Miami plus 340, and Ole Miss plus 550. I also think it's hilarious that if you look at these FanDuel odds, that Ole Miss, the SEC team, has by far the worst odds. They are as far from number 3 as number 3 is from number 1. if my math is correct.
Yeah. What's even funnier about that too is you can tell that like Vegas and Greg Sankey and the rest of the college football playoff committee were also not banking on the fact that Ole Miss was going to be the team in the Final Four.
Right.
No, they were expecting it to be one of Georgia, Bama, or Oklahoma. They were not banking it on it being Texas A&M or Ole Miss, and here we are.
Yep. So I thought that was interesting. I got sent that today. Wanted to pull that little bad boy
I
out.
like it.
I thought that was interesting. Somebody said the preppy kids, the finance bros. That's exactly who it was where I grew up in high school. I don't know what it's like the rest of the country, but that's absolutely what it was when I went to high school. And they weren't the cream of the crop athletes. That's what was so surprising to me is when I watched like a Matt Jeffrey play lacrosse and Jordan, like these guys are athletes. And
what my first year at the University of Indianapolis was the first year that they had a lacrosse team. And my first interaction with them was not great. And like not even like a conversation. It's like they were all in like the chubbies, like the 5-inch inseam khaki board shorts.
Yeah.
And they were on like these like long flowy t-shirts and like they just kind of talked a certain way. Like they talk like lax bros. And I was like, I bet these guys are just not even close to being good at whatever they play.
They're soft. Yeah.
And the first time, like we played like intramural flag football with them, and the two most athletic guys on the team by far were the two lacrosse players. It was. I was like, oh, okay, you guys just move a little different. Like you talk funny, but you move a little different. Like it was impressive, very impressive. I'm with you.
That's funny. All right. Let's get to some more questions here. I want to try to get everybody in at least for one. Let's go to Mike Honorshowski.
Love it. If Notre Dame misses in the portal, are there players on the roster that can change positions to fill holes?
Well, yes, at one spot. I think that was already going to happen anyway. And I expect Chris Burgess to be a D tackle, but I expect Chris Burgess to be a D. So, I mean, my answer is no, but yes. Right now, I fully expect Chris Burgess to be a D tackle. I think that's going to happen. Even if Notre Dame gets 2 D tackles in the portal, I still think Chris Burgess is going to be a D tackle. Now, if they get 3 D tackles and nobody at the end, then maybe they might have to kind of cut some weight off of Chris Burgess and keep him on the outside. Maybe because I've been told he's over 290 right now, but I think that's the plan, which is also why I don't think they need 3. And why ultimately, as long as they get at least 1, there's a chance for them to be pretty good again to D tackle next year. There's a chance. But, if you get 1 and then Jason Onye can come back and Chris Burgess moves inside to go with Cole Mullins, Elijah Hughes, Davion Dixon, Sean Savant, now I'm feeling a lot better about things. I'll tell you right now, if I was Notre Dame, give me Xavier Gilliam, move Chris Burgess inside, fight like heck to get Jason Onye back. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go out there and just really try to work hard to get Armo Mulcom back as well. That's what I would do. And then if you can get the kid from Wake Forest or somebody else, Francis Brewu, that's fine. But I think there's answers that are beyond just multiple portal guys. I don't know how practical they all are, but part of it is out of your control. And that is you don't know what the NCAA is going to do with Jason Onye. And if I'm Notre Dame, I'm planning on not to have him.
Yeah.
And then if you get him back, that's a freaking added bonus that you're super excited about. But you have to prepare. You can't build your roster thinking he's going to be back and then he's not back.
100%.
The nice thing I like about Gilliam and Brewu, and before you finish, before you get on there, Travis, I also like the fact that both of them are have eligibility left beyond 2026.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I have hesitated to give my overall thoughts on the portal because I don't want to make it sound like I'm dismissing some of these issues. But I don't think that it is all overly negative if Notre Dame does continue to miss some of these guys in the portal. I think that would force some of the coaches' hands to develop the younger talent that they have in the room. And that doesn't mean Elijah Golden or Tiki Hola have to be starters on day 1. But that would force their hand in the wide receiver room to put people on the field. It's not an easy cop-out to just go and get 2 portal wide receivers and say, Cam Williams, Micah Gilbert, they're just still not ready. I think it would force their hand at certain spots. 1. 2, if they miss on, and I don't know if they are or aren't, I don't have the sources for that. But let's just say hypothetically they miss on the Wake Forest kid and the Xavier Gilliam kid. the next thing I'm doing is technically it's still turning your direction to the portal. I'm doing whatever I have to get Armel Mukin back on the roster.
And Francis Brewu back in. Like
Yeah. Absolutely. Defensive tackle is the one position that I can confidently say that I believe that they have to get somebody. If they don't get anybody at wide receiver, I'm not upset. Are there players that I would like? Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because Reed Harris and Isaiah Canyon can make you better.
Yeah.
But not getting them doesn't mean you can't have a championship caliber receiving core. It just raises the odds that you do.
100%. 100%. But it's
strike out a
not,
D tackle and we're a lot more concerned.
Yes.
Now you're praying that the NCAA finally, for the first time, does the right thing and lets Jason Oye come back. You know what I mean? Like, first for everything.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep, I agree. That's where I'm at with it. Like, there's just Notre Dame is not as in a disparaging spot as like what some want to believe that they are. And I'm also not trying to paint this picture that they're perfectly fine either, because they're not. But there is a scenario where they miss on some people in the portal, especially at receiver, and it forces their hand to get some of these guys ready.
Mm-hmm.
So 13 scholarship wide receivers.
Yep.
You're telling me you can't get 4 ready?
Right.
And I'm not even going to say 4 because 2 of them are already kind of ready.
Right. You just got to get – my thing is get 3 ready to some degree, and then you got a 5-man rotation, and you're good.
Yeah.
Because like you said, as long as Greathouse is healthy, you got 2 that are already ready to go.
Yeah.
And Micah Gilbert played a decent amount this year too. I mean, he's played.
Mm-hmm.
So, he was in your rotation last year. So.
Yep. I'm with you.
Yep. All right. Let's get to this question right here. This is a good one from KRG888.
In your opinion, do you think getting someone like Brody Foley is more important than grabbing a wide receiver in the portal?
No. And now this question came up pretty soon into the show starting. So like this was like we were just starting the tight end conversation when this question was asked. I think we kind of addressed it, but again, I don't think that you have to. What I don't want Notre Dame to do is every year that they have someone talented but unproven, go to the portal and get a veteran that sits in front of that guy. Like I don't want to do that because now you're stunting the growth of players behind them. And we just pointed out 2021 Georgia. You know, I mean, Trev, that 2021 Georgia team, they lost George Pickens. They lost, they lost some veteran players. They weren't great throwing the ball the year before. And they came out the next year. They got Brock Bowers as a freshman. Jermaine Burton's now a sophomore. You got Ladd McConkey's a freshman. A.D. Mitchell's a freshman. Literally 3 of their top 4 pass catchers were freshmen or sophomores. And they went out and won a title. Now you won't see that as much because teams aren't going to take a chance of having a bunch of freshmen and sophomores. They're going to go get portal guys. And that's fine to a degree. But I don't want to see that every year, everywhere. You made the decision not to go get a veteran in front of CJ Carr last year, and look how that turned out. Turned out pretty darn good. You made the decision not to go get a veteran cornerback last year because you had the incoming freshmen coming in, and they turned out to be pretty good football players. So with a very bright future, talking about Mark Zachary and Dallas Gold. So, but you also went out and got a Jalen Stroman just in case Tay Johnson wasn't ready, but then allowed Tay to fight, compete, and win that starting job. My thing is I would have been okay if they'd have taken Brody Foley. I'd have been totally fine with it, but my preference was not to go to the portal. So I'm not going to criticize him for making that decision. I'm going to praise him for making that decision. Coach up the guys you have. Trust Mike Denbrock and Harris Bivin to coach up the guys you have. Do that, and we'll be okay.
From Mark Couch, the portal is now a time machine for your lifetime as a fan. You can take up to 10 former Notre Dame players to add to this year's team. Who do you bring to the future and why?
This is great. I love this one. So what are the needs right now, right? Receiver. Be really nice to get myself a nice boundary receiver. So I'm going back to 2010 and I'm bringing in Michael Floyd.
Yep.
Everything I just said about the tight end room, scratch that because I'm going back to 2011 and I'm bringing in Tyler Eifert because there is no Tyler Eifert in the portal right now. I'm going back to 2017 and I'm bringing in Quentin Nelson to be my left guard. And my starting lineup is going to include Quentin Nelson, Charles Jagasaw, and Kirby Lambert. If Ashton Craig isn't healthy, I'm going back to the early 2000s, and I'm bringing my guy Jeff Fain in. Right, so that's Floyd, Eifert, Q, and Jeff Fain. I'm going to the portal. My defensive tackle is I'm going to the portal tonight. I got like this visions of like Loki season 1. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what's I envision in my head.
Yeah.
I'm going to 1993, and I'm bringing back Bryant Young. And then when I'm done with that, I'm also then going to go back to 2012, and I'm going to bring back Lewis Nix and start BY at 3 technique and Lewis Nix at nose. If you wanted to go BY and Stephon Tuitt, I would not be upset with that either. And then after that, I'm going to go to the portal, and I'm going to so hold on. So I got receiver, tight end, offensive line, 2D tackles. That's 5, right? So far. I'm going back to 2018. Is it 18? And I'm bringing back Justin Yoon. Yep. That's what I'm doing there for sure. That's 6. Then I am I'm going to go back to 2015, and I'm going to bring back Jalen Smith to start next to Drake Bowen. Love you, Jaden Alsbury. You're going to be a great rotation player, but that's what we're doing. I'm going back to 2018, and I'm bringing in Adetokunbo Ogundeji. The reason I'm bringing Adi and not Khalid Kareem or Julian Aguara is because I'm looking for a rotation defensive end more so than a guy roster building. So bringing in Adetokunbo Ogundeji, who I thought is a great guy to bring in off the bench. That's 8, right? Here's one. I'm going back to 2012. I'm bringing back Thomas Reese because I'm going to give CJ Carr a smart veteran guy that can take him under his wing and help him develop, but can get on there and in a pinch get us out of there. Because I've said maybe a backup quarterback. So that's number 9.
Savvy.
Yep. And then my final piece, I'm going for it all, baby. I'm trying to get this thing done. I'm going to add another wideout. I'm going back to 2015. And I'm putting Will Fuller in this rotation as well. And I got a 4-man rotation of Michael Floyd, Will Fuller, Jaden Greathouse, and Jordan Faison, with Tyler Eifert at tight end, Cooper Flanagan, James Flanagan as my tight ends, with Quentin Nelson and Jeff Fain on the offensive line. And we're calling it a wrap. Strike up the trophy, strike up the band. We're winning it all, because I'm also not letting anyone else go back in time and getting any other portal players for their teams. It's only fair for Notre Dame.
Very fair. Oh, I love that. We have a lot of similar ones. I'm going back to 2015, getting Will Fuller, going back to 2010, 11, getting Michael Floyd. I'm bringing back Quentin Nelson and Joe Alt.
Okay.
And then for my interior defensive line, I'm bringing back Riley Mills from 2024.
Yeah.
And then I'm also bringing back 2012 Stephon Tuitt and plugging him on the inside. I'm going back to 2020, pick 1 of 2, 3, or 4, 2022, 3 or 4, and I'm bringing back Ben Morrison and putting him back in my nickel. I'm also bringing back Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Bryce.
Would you put Christian at nickel and keep Benjamin outside? Or would you put Benjamin in the nickel?
I'm getting to that.
Okay, gotcha. My bad.
No worries.
Shut it, Brian. Just let me talk. I didn't interrupt you. Let me talk.
Brian, it's my turn. So no. No, I'm for the backfield. I'm bringing back Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, because those are 2 players that I just really wish I could have seen get a ring in South Bend. So bringing back those 2, and then for my field, and I can just let Christian Gray kind of be who he is, be a big play guy. I'm bringing back Cam Hart from 2023 and putting him at my field, Ben Morrison at my nickel, Leonard Moore in my boundary, and just letting
nobody's completing passes with Adon Schuler and Tay Johnson back then. Nobody's completing passes on that team.
No, bro. No. And then I'm just letting Christian Gray be the relief guy and just whoever needs a breather, he can spell. He can spell it nickel, field, or boundary.
That's funny. Yeah.
Yep. That'd be a nasty team.
I'll take it. I dig it. All right, let's get to real quick here from Holiday Everyday 550. Any idea when a decision we made on the status of Jason Onye? I don't know. I'm hoping it's the next couple weeks, but that's more wishful thinking because Jason's got to start school or be going through school. Hopefully, because he's going to have to go through the NFL draft process. I don't think this is going to be like a month or two. He's got to know. I would imagine the NCAA will act before. I would hope. If not, I'm going to destroy them like publicly as much as I can. You're gonna act. I shouldn't even say that because I don't know why they wouldn't act before the NFL declaration deadline, which I believe is in January.
It's like the day after the portal. It's like middle of January.
So I would think that they're going to decide before then. But knowing the NCAA, who really knows? But I'm hopeful that they do the right thing. Because he lost the season last year to a mental health issue, and we say that that's important in our society. And hopefully he'll get that back.
It's looking like for players that were in the playoffs, it's around January 23rd, so a week after the portal. The dates shift, but typically fall around January 14th through the 15th for most players, non-college football playoffs. So, it'll be around the time of the portal closing. So, hopefully soon, to your point.
Yep, hope so.
From Alekino, 2016, think the slow portal start has anything to do with the elite class we have coming in? Guys not trying to battle for a spot?
No, I don't think that's it. I mean, Notre Dame's not going to throw money at a kid that isn't going to, not come in and be able to play and that kind of thing. I don't think that's it. I really think that the slow start is part of it is just missing on a couple kids. But again, I don't think they necessarily planned on having a bunch of kids signed right now. We're going to find out if the strategy works, but they kind of went into the transfer process kind of like they did high school recruiting, it seems, in that they wanted to be the last visit. In the portal, that doesn't always work out well. You want to kind of be first. So like Indiana brought kids in and said, if you don't sign with us, we're not going to recruit you anymore, and gave them a big deal. And some kids took it, some didn't. Or, Xavier Gilliam said no. Nick Marsh said yes. Josh Burnham said yes. That's the reality of it. So we'll see kind of how that goes. But I don't think that's necessarily. I mean, is there a kid like that, Al? Sure, but I don't think those kids would have ever really been guys that you would have wanted or Notre Dame would have necessarily looked at too hard because they were going to look at different schools. They were going to look at Kentucky's and schools like that anyway. So I don't think that's as big of an issue for me.
Agreed. From Irish Fan for Life, I completely agree. We have enough talent in the tight end room. That being said, is there any insight you can provide on the situation with the Tulsa tight end and why that happened?
I don't have any, honestly. I wish I did, but I don't. Right now, the staff is just focused on recruiting. I'll try to find the answer to that when the dust settles. But honestly, I don't care. I like the end result. That's what I care about. The end result is you're going to go with the guys you have, which is what they should have done anyway.
From Andrew Gilmore, was Miami's defensive coordinator hire the best coordinator hire of 2025? Corey Heatherman.
It's in the conversation. I mean, I think Matt Patricia turned out to be a great hire.
Yeah.
Ohio State didn't lose their playoff game because their defense. I mean, that turned out to be a great hire. Boy, I'm trying to think. Best coordinator hire. I mean, definitely better than Notre Dame's D coordinator hire over the course of the season. Second half of the year, Chris Ash was as good as anybody as far as the result. First half, not so much. I mean, doesn't Texas Tech have a new defensive coordinator this year as well?
Yes, they do. Both of their coordinators are in their first year, I believe.
Their D coordinator, I thought, did an even better job than their offensive coordinator. Boy, they're in there. Yeah, it's.
I'll tell you one that did not live up to the
last year. Miami's defense was very mediocre last year, and they're the driver of this team's success this season. I mean, I don't think you can. I don't think you can discount that. the job that he did. The only other thing that I would say, boy, man, yeah. There's guys that I think were as good. Arguably, I don't know that you can point to anybody that was definitively better. I think the Utah offensive coordinator did a phenomenal job with that unit. I mean, you can't I mean, their offense was pretty darn flipping good this year. But yeah, Heatherman was pretty good. He was pretty good.
Yeah. I'll tell you one that did not work out the way that we thought it was going to was Ryan Grubb.
Yes.
That did. I mean,
that did not go well.
No,
it did not. It did not go well. And there was a couple others that I thought were going to end up being good moves that ended up not panning out. But yeah, I mean, I think Patricia was outstanding. Trying to think of some others. I mean, Michigan's new OC was exactly what we thought he was going to be. Meh. Trying to think of who else had like big hires this offseason. Did Ole Miss didn't have new coordinators. Georgia didn't. A&M didn't. Well, I mean, you could argue that the new D coordinator at Texas A&M is Mike Elko.
I was just about to say.
That made him better, but I don't know that he did like an elite job. Did a good job. Well, a new coordinator this year that I thought did a great job is Brent Venables taking over the Oklahoma defense. Made them a very different team. A very different team.
Yeah, I was about to say, talk about the driver for success.
Yeah, I mean, you had two playoff teams who part of the reason for their success was their head coach saying, "No one's going to run this defense like I can, so I'm taking over." That's not some sort of keep that in mind, Marcus Freeman. That has nothing to do with Notre Dame. That's just an observation, period.
Yeah, 100%.
He needed to do that. Marcus Freeman doesn't need to take over the defense. He just needs to be more hands-on to make sure that Chris Ash does what he wants him to do. Because when Chris Ash did what Marcus Freeman wanted him to do, that defense was outstanding. And if we get a whole season of Chris Ash doing kind of what he needs to do and what Marcus Freeman wants him to do, which is not here's the defense to run, but man, here's our philosophy. We're going to attack. We're going to be aggressive. We're going to go. We could get a whole season of what we saw this year. I mean, there's no reason to think we can't. Because everybody keeps talking, well, they played bad teams. They may have played bad teams, but they played a lot of really good offenses. Arkansas team sucks, but Arkansas's offense is really good. Yeah, Arkansas went 2-10 this year. But here's what they did in SEC play. 35 points, 31 points, 42 points, 24 points, 35 points, 22 points, 37 points, and 17 points. That's what they did in league play. I mean, look, Arkansas this year averaged 30.4 points per game in league play. That was 6th in the SEC. 2 points behind Vanderbilt and only 3.9 points behind the leader, Tennessee. They were ahead of Texas, Alabama, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Notre Dame held them to 13 points. That was a very good offense. NC State, very good offense. USC, very good offense. Navy, very good offense. And they shut them all down. So the teams might not have been great, but some of the offenses they faced were pretty good. And lit them up.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Actually, we got that one. Here's one from Raymond.
Would you entertain Keon Keeley if you felt he was brought in with this new D-line coach?
Yeah, if Keon wanted to be here, I'd take him. I would. Because if he wants to come here, it tells me that Keon looks back and is like, that's where I should have gone to begin with. Like, that's what that tells me. So if he wanted to come back, now I would have some conversations with Keon. Hey, where's your head at? What are you going to do in the classroom? I'd want to make sure that Keon's really bought in and is really ready to put in the work and become the player he's capable of becoming. But Keon's still a talented kid, and I still think the world of him as a young man. I think Keon needed the discipline of a place like Notre Dame. I've said this all along. That's the mistake he made, not because Notre Dame's system is whatever. Yes, Notre Dame's system fitted him better, but Notre Dame fit what Keon needed. Not necessarily what he wanted, but what he needed. He needed that. He had that in high school. And his coach, Coach Dom, was a very much a keep him on straight, keep him, foot up his behind. Keon, some kids need that. I needed that at times in my life. Keon needed that, and I think Keon would have been a much different player had he come to Notre Dame than what he was at Alabama. People don't believe me on this, but where you go has a big impact on who you are as a player. Because if you go somewhere that doesn't fit your system, and I said this when Malik Zaire picked Florida, I said, "Oh man, I wish he wouldn't have picked Florida. Bad fit for him," and it just turned out to be that way. I think fit matters, and not just scheme fit, but cultural fit. Keon needed a place where that was going to keep him on track and keep him regimented and all that kind of stuff, and just didn't work out that way, unfortunately. But maybe there's another chance for him and for Notre Dame. So yes, I would absolutely bring him in if he wanted to come. Yes, as long as he passed different aspects, to be able to get in. So yeah, I would absolutely look at Keon. Let me see if there's a couple others. There's a lot of good questions that were there. Let me just see here real quick. We talked about Chris Burgess. Miss you too, Tommy. I see that question in there. Here's the one I wanted to get to. There's two
Bobby,
more. These are the two.
From Bobby S. Would Gilliam and Brewu be enough at defensive tackle for this portal to be a success at defensive tackle? I think we need 3.
I've said all along they need 2 because they're going to get another D tackle, in my opinion, in Chris Burgess. So you've got Davion Dixon's going to be a second-year player. Sevillano's going to his 3rd year. You've got Elijah Hughes. You've got Cole Mullins. I think there's plenty of players there, in my opinion, if you get those 2. So, yes, I think that would be enough for me. I would be very happy with that duo. Could it be better? Sure, but it's good. It's very good. And I think they would fit this system very well. So I finally had a chance to watch Xavier Gilliam film last night, Trev, and I'm thinking he's 6'2", 305. He's going to be like a plugger. He's a penetrator. Like he gets after it. He was not great against Iowa, was good against Ohio State, really good against Indiana and Clemson. And just shooting gaps. He was rocking. He was also knocking back some Indiana linemen at times in that game as well. Like I was really impressed with how I played against Indiana. And I was I learned one thing and was reminded of another thing breaking down that game. Number one, I learned that this kid's a good football player. And then I was reminded of how good of an offensive line coach Bob Ostad is. He's so good. So, yeah, I'd be happy with that.
From Aiden Benami, thoughts on Notre Dame going for another quarterback with reasonable talent purse? I know he is by no means starting, but why not let the guys we have go after it? Got to get experience at some point.
I don't disagree with that, but if you can get a kid that has experience that's willing to come in and just like be the backup, I don't think that hurts you because right now I don't know that for a fact that the guys you have are the guy. And if something happens to CJ, maybe they don't trust those guys. I don't think Notre Dame is looking to add a quarterback just to add a quarterback. I think they're looking to add a guy that they feel like can get us through if something happens to CJ. And maybe Blake can be that guy. Maybe Noah can be that guy. Maybe Teddy can be that guy. I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's just more about we want to have as many good bodies in that room as possible. And I don't think that's where I'm at. If they add a quarterback, as long as he's got the right attitude, I'm okay with that. If they don't add a quarterback, I'm also okay with that. It just depends on who they get. And does that cause Blake Hebert to leave or someone to leave? Then I wouldn't bring a guy in. But if those guys are willing to compete and battle, then go for it. Because the kid they're looking at from Mercer, I mean, he's got experience and all that, but he's not a more talented player than he'll be the least talented quarterback in the room. He'll just be the most experienced outside of CJ. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. Fair point.
Yeah. And then here's the last one that we'll bring up, and then we'll be done.
Another one from Iden. Do you guys see Beamer go after Kiffin for not even giving him a heads up about interviewing his staff? Lane is a different breed of person. How do parents send their kids to him? Wow.
I often ask myself that same question. Probably because parents look at it like, I mean, let's be honest, not every parent in the world is the most moral human being on the planet. I mean, I still don't think he's the most immoral LSU coach of the last 5 years. That title belongs to Ed Orgeron. It's LSU, it's Ole Miss, it's you're getting money, it's the NFL. There's a lot of reasons, and then again, they're not all cued into the things that we're cued in. There's a lot of parents that have no clue what Shane Beamer said about it. But basically, he said that he got a call from his running backs coach or something like that that said LSU was talking to him, and then that next morning took the job. And most coaches, the vast majority will call the coach, say, "Hey, coach, I'm interested in talking to this guy. Just to give you a heads up, I want to talk to so-and-so." Most coaches will. Now, sometimes what a coach will do is a coach will reach out to an agent or a coach. "Hey, man, would you be interested in this job?" "Yeah, I'd be interested." "Cool. Let me reach out to Marcus." But you don't need to go to Marcus if the guy's not interested. But you don't do the interview, offer him a job, and do all that without even talking to somebody. Like that. It's just disrespectful, but no one's ever accused Lane Kiffin of having respect for other people. So it's just the reality of it. But at the same time, that's his immoral aspect. I don't want to really hear too much from SEC coaches about improperly poaching people. We're in an era where you're reaching out to other people's players without them knowing about it while they're still active, and you're going to get mad because he's reaching out to your assistant coach. Come on, bro. You know what I mean? So, yeah, Lane was wrong, but cry me a river, for that. You know what I mean? You can miss me. You can miss me. And as Insured by Big said, especially not Beamer, y'all have no idea. No, I do. That's why I'm like, yeah, Lane was wrong, but I don't have a lot of sympathy for Shane Beamer. You know what I mean? There's a right way and a wrong way to do things, and Lane didn't do it. No matter who was on the opposite end, you can't control what kind of person Shane Beamer is. You can only control what you do.
Yeah.
And that's how I look at it.
That's fair. I mean, I was, I learned that was a thing 2 minutes ago, that coaches reach out to other coaches and say that they're going to, I just didn't even know that was a thing.
There's no rule about it. It's just a professional courtesy. And most do it. Not all. Most do it. Especially when it's a guy that didn't pursue you.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So that's kind of part of it as well. But that's kind of where I'm at on that one. So
fair enough. Well, folks, that is going to do it for us here today on the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Here in a couple of minutes, the guys are going live over on IB Nation Sports Beat, so be sure to tune into them. They're talking more transfer portal happenings. Brian and I will be back tomorrow. It's Wednesday, so it'll be buy, sell, hold day. Make sure to get your post up. Thread is already up on the message boards at-irishbreakdown.com. So all the more reasons to go sign up and to get your buy, sell, hold submissions in. On your way out of here, please be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell. Share this podcast with your friends and family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So till tomorrow, that's Brian. I'm Trevor. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.